On with the monster man himself, Bryan Baugh. Want some candy? Only on Fun My Comic, and then we're gonna attempt to play this. Maybe it won't crash the system. Wulf and Batsy, 10, 11, 12. Bryan, do you tuck your children in at night with that? Scare the kids to death. I tell you what, man.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Before I forget, I actually, when you were over at Alterna on Wulf and Batsy 3, I had 2 ads in Wulf and Batsy 3.
Oh, cool,
so,
cool.
You know, that's my connection with you, you know,
nice.
Direct connection. I really enjoy, you know, doing that, you know, getting just ads out there like that. That's awesome.
Oh man, awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know that you were on YouTube. Well, I guess should have assumed you were on YouTube. I've seen you. I just didn't know we weren't connected, but I've rectified that and I've subbed to your channel. I appreciate that.
Oh, awesome. Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for subbing.
Oh, thank you for just being around, man. I mean, you've been in this a while, haven't you? You've gotten like 3 or 4 omnibuses worth of material back there. I know. Now is all that freed up because you Wolf and Turner was not, and now your own brand is not the first attempt at Wolf and Batsy. You've got like a Sears catalog and the telephone directory, and you've got a bunch of stuff, and I see you've changed your setting there where you're broadcasting from the last
Yeah.
time I saw you. But
Yeah.
this is the first time we've had you on, by the way, but not the first time I've seen you. I've seen you out and about, for a while
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But it's a fun read. Yours is one of the few that I've actually sat down and read
Wow. Thank you.
out of all the crowdfunding stuff, and
Oh, man,
it's very
thanks.
good stuff. Very good stuff. Of course, I don't know. That's how I got started in comics was monsters. How did you get started?
Well, pretty much the same way. I mean, I have fuzzy childhood memories of my dad showing me Spider-Man's,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I'm old enough that Romita was still drawing it when I was a little kid. So
There
I got to
was
see the.
one panel where Remita Jr. It looked like a Remita Jr. sort of reaction shot in your trailer.
I'm talking about Romita Senior.
Are you talking about Senior? Okay, I
Yeah.
actually met him. He's well,
Oh,
I've
did
met
you?
most of them, but yeah. Yeah, and I wrote an article about our meeting that was published last year in Comics Unlimited number 13 in the
Yeah.
UK for Glenn Fleming,
Hmm.
who's doing some design work for me, and we hope to do some books together. One on John Buscema and one on somebody you've never heard of, but is a big name in comics called Jack Adler. He actually worked on the printing of Action Comics number 1 and
Wow.
was the vice president in charge of hiring and firing and production over there at DC Comics. He did gray tone covers and brought in partial photo covers, into comics. He was a photographer as well, man of many talents.
Mm.
Uh, but and actually hired like people like Neil Adams, Bernie Wrightson, Mike Kaluta, bunch of creators.
Hmm.
But nobody knows his name, because he was a
Yeah.
colorist, and colorists, as you know, are not even really recognized except, maybe after 2000. Really,
Right. Yeah. Well, I think the guy that colored Hellboy got some recognition, although it's hard.
yeah.
The early Hellboy, I remember that was a sort of
I
a
could
new.
get recognized too for that if I just did red, black, and white. What the hell, Brian? We
Well,
could do something like Sin City, or something.
right. That colorist had an easy job.
Schindler's List comes to mind.
Right. Right.
Actually,
Well, but
actually,
that. Oh, go ahead.
actually, I have that Grave Tale story where the bog monster's coming up out of the grave. Uh, on my campaign, we're going to do spot coloring on that. Where the color, kind of like in Schindler's List, helps tell the story. You know,
Hmm.
if there's color, it's going to have a meaning.
Hmm.
In there, which really it's about the killer clown. It's really his story and not so much the heroes that at the end, but
Right.
his descent into killing little children and all like that heavy stuff. Anyway, I don't know what he would write, but it's pretty PC. It's it's
Right.
it's kind of like Jim Aparo suggested violence off screen. you know
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
think you have to be overly graphic. I know a lot of people like that. Are you overly graphic with Wolf and Batsy? That's not really what you're going for, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I got some pretty graphic violence in my
Yeah.
comics. They are
Okay.
definitely rated R.
Carrie
um,
says that she subbed to you as well. So that's good. We're making
oh, thanks
progress.
a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, but that was my introduction to comics was really early Spider-Mans in the late '70s when I was a little kid, and
Okay.
then when I was old enough to start looking for them at the like 7-Eleven, like at the spinner rack. I think the first thing I got hooked on was like Swamp Thing and like Weird War Tales.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Creature Commandos were a big one for me when I was really little. Before I kind of really got hooked and started collecting.
I like the Creature Commandos. Of course,
Oh yeah.
Joe Kubert drawing some of
Yes.
that, at least the covers.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they introduced Medusa with the snakes in the hair,
Yes.
was a little latecomer to them, but nice female
Right.
addition to the group.
Yeah.
You had Frankenstein and the vampire, and you had a werewolf,
Yep.
and you had Medusa. Am I leaving anyone out?
Well, sometimes GI Robot would sort of jump in and help him a little bit, but he was
GI
not a
Robot
regular.
too, and he goes all the way back to the 60s. He's
Yeah.
actually, they had the original Suicide Squad in the early 60s, and I'm sure Adler worked on a lot of those. A lot of that color that pops in 60s comics. In fact, I've got a few production pieces right here that I could show you that would blow your mind by
Nice.
Luis Dominguez.
Okay.
Now, I'll have to look them up. Oh, here's one that's a partial gray tone cover. Now, I don't know who did this one, but it's the sinking of the Titanic.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm familiar with that one. Yeah.
And this is partial gray toning. And Adler was, I actually bought this from a friend of mine that he has a bunch, I have a bunch. We probably together, we have probably the best, collection. They all come with the certificate of authenticity. And
Weird Mystery is a favorite series of mine. That series had so many great covers.
there's another
House
one.
of Secrets, yes.
Yeah, and that one's signed by Luis Dominguez.
Nice.
That's kind of a partial gray tone cover too. You can see back here the palm trees are just in gray, and they don't use hard shadows, hard blacks. Although this has more of it, they kind of got phased out in the early 70s. But with Sea Devils, with some GI combats, and maybe even some weird war books.
Yeah.
They did things. This is a picture of Adler here, and I'll show you an example of like you have painted pieces like this, and this one's actually signed by Adler. He's passed away now, but Joe Kubert won there, the losers, and they would just kind of indicate where the colors would be on these.
Yeah.
And these would be production pieces. There he is with Robert, the guy that I bought these through. So there's Jack Adler holding, and the one. What's exciting about this? I actually own that Son of Tomahawk or whatever he's holding, and that's previous to him signing it. This is a Frank Frazetta.
Oh yes.
Sort of homage that they did, and this is the only one. Let's see, everything's opposite here. Here's the painted piece. This is the only one that had all five production pieces to it. I've got the file copy, the approval cover, the untrimmed approval cover with all the ads, the painted piece, and the color guide. But I'm really wanting to get to. You really triggered me with that, because one of my favorites is a Luis Dominguez Weird Worlds number 14. I can probably bring it up on eBay quicker.
I may very well have it. I got a lot of those.
Do you?
Yeah.
This is a key one that I got in the collection. That's Black Orchid's first appearance.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And then here is one Neil Adams painted piece. And then we have the approval cover of it. And then here is the actual file copy, which is pretty neat because it has an indentation here with where a paper clip was, where other stuff was put with it. I would never press that out because that's part of the provenance of it, that this is the actual DC file copy. But and then here's an early Bernie Wrightson here, Sword and Sorcery. A lot of people don't even know that he did stuff like that. But and I would go for like Phantom of the Woodstock Festival, things that were either have diptychs like this or triptychs like that in the collection. Or here was, I think, the very first one I got that actually had Adler signed Anthro number 2.
Nice
painted piece.
Cool. Yeah.
Just and I didn't even know who Anthro was till,
Right.
hey, Rob Ewing in the house. This one's kind of special because they crossed out Alex Toth. I assume you know Alex
Oh
Toth.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And this is actually Joe Kubert with Neil Adams inks over it, I believe. At least that's what he did in the issue. And they
Oh
changed
wow.
that. This is an early pull signed by him that's X'd out, and it's actually says Neil Adams if you get the actual book of Enemies.
Right.
Just let's see. Oh, I could show you so many. Uh, let's see. Oh, I know you're into the horror, so
Absolutely.
I'm hoping to put this in the book. Actually, this was the cover that they
Oh
used for
yeah,
one of
number
those
one.
that they used for the showcase books, kind of like the
Yes.
Marvel Essential books.
Yep.
Here's a double, and they're signed by Wrightson
I
there,
have that issue.
and they actually used this on the reprint cover as well. And these are the pieces that help produce your issue that you got. Actually, signed by Wrightson there. I'm flexing a little bit here. I'm just trying to get to
Blame you.
the actual one here. Here's that one that Jack Adler was holding, Son of Tomahawk, and it's the painted piece, and he actually signed it right there on him with ballpoint pen.
Nice.
Nice Joe
Cool.
Kubert cover. I love
Yeah.
snow scenes. And the
Yeah, me
great
too.
thing was it was a diptych, two piece. The very first one I got was Hawk and Dove #1 that I bought. Here it is, signed by Luis Dominguez, number 14. I love this. The sort of out of a phantom bomber comes phantom parachuting dead
Cool.
soldiers.
Yeah. Huh?
Yeah, I love
Oh
that.
yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah.
I don't think I have that one. I got most of them though.
And there you
Yes,
got
that's a classic.
color. That's another Luis Dominguez cover. I was till I started collecting these, I didn't know who Luis Dominguez was.
Right.
There's the silver
wow.
print, so you can see it in black and white. And then Luis Dominguez, after Bernie Wrightson did his 10 issues of Swamp Thing, he was the first one to do Swamp Thing number 11 cover. So he was the first cover artist to do Swamp Thing.
Love that cover.
Look at that.
Yes.
Just wonderful stuff. And he does, and people don't know who he is. He's got other stuff like this that are, like you said, 7-Eleven. You might get one of these on your Slurpee cup. That's
exactly
this
right.
is stock images that they would use again and again and again.
Yeah, or T-shirts.
T-shirts, Slurpee cups, anything they could slap it on, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Now I see you got some former customers behind you there. Frankenstein, a werewolf. What's that all about?
Oh, I just collect Halloween masks, and those are
you?
just 2 of them. Yeah.
Well, I've got a few of them. I took Frankenstein down, but yeah, I've got a few of them myself. Fun to collect. Bryan, your stretch code, which I presume are trading cards, are they a physical thing or digital?
They're right here.
You go physical in hand. Yeah.
And they've all been unlocked.
Rob Ewing, who's doing some work for me and up on my campaign there too. He's a great artist and working for Timothy Austin as well, on Melvin and some other things. I love Bryan's work, from a fellow cartoony artist to another. Yeah. You both have sort of a cartoony style. Where did you study in that? I mean, what kind of did you just start drawing Spider-Man at a young age, or what? Monsters or?
I did just start drawing monsters from the time I was a kid, but I did go to art school for 4 years, Columbus College of Art and Design, from 1990 to 94.
Okay.
And then I worked in book illustration for a while, and then I've worked in television animation for the past 23 years. So all those things have kind of shaped my drawing style.
Yeah. What were you always drawn to animation? Hey, Lex.
I was always drawn to comics, visual storytelling.
Okay.
And I sort of bumbled my way into animation by accident.
Okay.
But it turned out to be a great way to make a living for an artist. It pays well. It has a union, so you got lots of benefits, and it's just a nice, good, steady living, and you get to draw funny pictures all day long.
Carrie's kind of new to the crowdfunding thing. She lives in the UK. That's no excuse. I'm just saying. She says, okay, next question. Why doesn't it give shipping costs for the cards?
Well, because the cards are weightless, pretty
Right.
much, and so I put basically free shipping on the cards.
Yeah, you can put
Um,
them in an
yeah,
envelope and pretty much ship them safely. You know, it's going to
yeah,
be under £1. So,
right. The idea
yeah.
being most people are going to get them with the books, so
Yeah.
I'll just toss them in.
Now, if she's in the UK, it's not going to be free, right? International?
No, I'm at this time I'm only shipping within the 50 U.S. states and
With the
Canada.
okay.
I
Yeah.
only set it up for that. Um,
Uh,
but after the campaign is over, I'll have everything available on my website store, and then maybe we can work something out.
and all those links are down in the description there.
Oh, okay.
So after the show, everybody, you can check out the different links that he has there. We'll kind of go through that. He, as I said, he is over on YouTube. 406 subscribers, 41 videos. I I've noticed it's not about quantity, it's about quality. You know, you can have 6 videos up and have massive followers if you're the right person.
Well, I'm still pretty new to it. Also, I've only been doing the YouTube thing since about, gosh, when did I start? The end
Yeah.
of 2000 or 2021, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, that was about when I started, you know. Uh Let me downsize that. So 99 backers. So the next backer would be number 100 unless
Oh,
we
that's good.
update
Yeah.
this.
Hey, how about that?
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you could be number 100.
I would have tweeted that out, Brian, before coming on here because
Well, actually, I think the
99
last
is
time I looked at
so
it,
close.
I think there must have been a couple recent backers, because I
Okay.
think the last time I
That's
looked at
always
it, it said
good.
97 or 98. So that's a surprise to me.
Yeah. Now, you know, I mentioned earlier, Brian, that you have reams and reams and reams and reams of material. When did you come up with Wolf and Batsy? Was it a childhood type thing?
No, I created the
No.
characters in December of 1999, very tail end of 99, right around Christmas vacation.
Okay.
Um, I'd drawn some comics before that. In
Well,
fact, one of my videos on
that was a century ago.
yeah, that's true. It was
You
last
know, I
century.
mean, that was
Well,
yeah,
we are talking about undead creatures here. What do you expect?
right. Yeah.
But but actually, there's one video on my YouTube channel that actually shows some of my comics I did before Wolf and Batsy, that you can
Okay.
look at. But I had done some amateur comics going all the way back to elementary school or high school. I'd been drawing comics of my own. But by the time I created Wolf and Batsy, I was probably 27, 28, something like that. 26, 27, somewhere in there. But
Mm-hmm.
It kind of just started with me wanting to do a comic, and I just kind of thought, well, the subject matter that I never get bored of is monsters, and my two favorite kind of monsters is kind of like vampires and werewolves.
So if you could distill it down now, I asked the hard questions here, like
yeah.
you know, if you could only have one monster movie out of all that were ever created, what would it be? Ooh.
Oh, that's impossible. Gosh,
No,
I love
I
so
would
many.
say King Kong. I'm just a
Okay,
King Kong fan, but
I'm
now
terrible
I
at
love
that.
Frankenstein. I mean, Boris Karloff. Come on, and so many great ones. But you gotta. I'm not gonna make it easy on you and say top 5. Give me one. Everything's been wiped out except one movie. What's it gonna be for you?
Oh my gosh, I am terrible at these kind of questions because I
And it
love
could
them
be
all.
Wizard of Oz, with the scary witch. Or how about
uh,
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang with the child catcher?
it
That was
might be,
scary.
it might be. Gosh, this is impossible. But it might be.
Watch Brian's head explode. Scanners.
It might be Creep Show,
Pod people. Okay, Creep Show. Okay.
because it has 5 stories. We're talking. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's no movies left in the world and I can only have one, at
Right.
least in Creep
Okay.
Show I
You
get
want a
5 stories.
variety. Okay,
There's a
I got.
great there's some great looking zombies. The visual thrills are awesome. The music is great. There's the crate monster. I don't get any vampires or werewolves, but I love that movie from end to end. So maybe Creep Show.
Yeah.
But I could probably name 20 other movies that I would.
All right. Well, give me your top 5.
Oh gosh. Well, The Howling is a huge one for me.
Oh, you just made a friend with Shadowhawk.
That's kind
Who?
of where my werewolf comes from, the look of it.
Okay. Now, do you
Uh,
like the more realistic wolf-looking Wolfman? See, I'm more of Wolfman type human. I guess the Lon Chaney Jr. type, or the Harry Hole, or the, you know, one of my favorites of all time. Man, it's not even a werewolf, but it's Frederick March with Jekyll and Hyde. 30.
yes,
I mean,
that's one of my favorite
it,
movies.
it still holds up,
Oh heck yeah,
today. And Frederick March, he actually won an Academy Award.
yes,
Can you imagine that? A horror
hmm
movie. That's
right,
when the awards really meant something, I think.
right. That is one of my
Performance.
favorites.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I've always said like Larry Talbot, the original Wolfman, Lon
Mhm.
Chaney Jr. is like my favorite movie character ever.
Now, do you do silent movies like you know,
hmm
Cabinet
Yes,
of
as a matter of
Dr.
fact,
Cachet or something?
I was just watching Phantom of the Opera the other night.
Okay. And that has some hand, you know, colored sequences with red in it,
Yes,
doesn't it? They were all,
yep.
every frame was hand colored.
The
Actually has some color footage in
1929
it.
the 1929 reissue version has the color sequences, and
Okay.
I
All
was
right.
watching that the night. The
How about
recent.
Man That Laughs?
Oh yeah, 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 with Conrad Veidt. I
Yeah.
love that one too.
Yeah.
That's one of the most emotional silent movies you'll ever see. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Um,
I think some of the creepiest stuff like Nosferatu or,
mhm,
I mean, that German expressionism and
mhm,
just the, sitting alone in the quiet, in the
mhm,
dark with monsters is
mhm,
scary. I mean,
mhm.
to me, watching a silent movie horror film is, I don't need the music.
Oh, I like to have the music on. I do.
Do you? Well, I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of those have scores,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I did. There's something about sitting and watching vampires or something.
Hmm.
There was one called Vampire. There was
Yes,
the one with
I'll try.
Satan in it from Dutch. Back in,
Hmm.
that's, I forget, Hexen or whatever it's called. I mean,
Haxon. In fact,
just
I got to jump on. I've got to jump in here.
okay.
I love Haxon. I actually named the villain in one of my Wolf and Batsy stories Haxon after
Okay.
that film.
Yeah. So, wow. I mean, when you delve into film and you delve into like some of the greatest villains, or you delve into like just like
Hmm.
Steven Spielberg or the guy that did it's blowing my mind. That's Star Wars.
George
They
Lucas.
all, yeah, George Lucas.
Hmm.
They study, they go, how did they do that? I mean,
Yep.
if you look at Metropolis and you look at those light rays going up and get the female robot, you're like, how did they do that? That must have been the Star Wars of its day,
Oh yeah.
you know?
I love also the John Barrymore Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, with the big head,
Yeah,
the
and
elongated head.
There's a scene in that where he has someone. They have a night. Someone has a nightmare and gets attacked by a giant tarantula, like a human-sized tarantula.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the creepiest sequences in a silent movie. Another also the Cat and the Canary, the one
Hey,
from
fan.
the 20s,
Right.
directed
That's sort
Paul
of
Lenny.
deformed, isn't it? Makeup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The director of that film, he all his movies are really great, but he died young, and all the books say that if he had lived, he probably would have been the guy directing the later Universal sound pictures like Dracula and Frankenstein. But
Uh-huh.
he, because he was a stellar director in the silent era, but he did Cat and the Canary, and that one's got some really cool visuals in it.
Yeah, I mean, the most blunderous thing of all time, Bela Lugosi not doing Frankenstein. It wouldn't have been as good. I don't think he would have looked as good and done it
No,
as near a good job, but he could have remained on top, and I think it still would have been a hit because we're at an era where no one had ever seen anything like that before. I think it would have he might have been the king of monsters from then on had he done Frankenstein, but he turned it down and he let Lugosi get his foot in the door. His
He let
very
Karloff
huge,
get in.
or Karloff, I'm sorry. And it was never the same for Bella after that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
There's.
I know that's speculation, but he
Well,
really should have done Frankenstein.
Well,
in my
2 points on that. Number one, according to all the books, he had really bad management who permitted him to, because he'd played Dracula on the stage and was such a hit on stage, but Universal was not interested in him for the movie. But his managers allowed him to write all these gushing letters to the studio and say, I'll do anything to play this part, blah, blah, blah. He made himself too vulnerable. And they just said, okay, fine, we can get this guy cheap. And so when they were looking at Conrad Veidt from The Man Who Laughs. They were looking at a lot of different actors for the part. And when they got down to it, they decided, you know what, Lugosi's just begging to do it. Let's just let him have it.
And he did it for like 10 years prior to the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they treated him poorly. They didn't pay him even as well as the supporting actors. And I think the fact that he made himself look too desperate might have hurt his career really badly too. But the other thing I was going to say is you can see Lugosi as Frankenstein's monster, although I think he's terribly miscast in Frankenstein Meets the Wolf Man, which is one of the best Universal monster movies. But the big weak link in that movie is Lugosi. I think it's miscast. I think they only cast him.
Yeah, I mean, he looks horrible in the makeup. Right. But you know what? Like I'm saying, it was really fortunate he turned Frankenstein. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, it's one of the greatest adaptations in movies, and really gutsy at the time. We're talking right before the censorship came in. You know, the pre-code movies. So. You know, you had salacious, I mean, after the codes came in, you didn't see woman's cleavage for 20 years in the movies.
This is true. Yes.
So some of those early horror movies are the best because they let it all hang out.
Yeah. And they're wonderfully shocking.
I'm alive. I know how it is to be God, or like God, and it's like, whoa, that must have been, that's mind blowing to some Christians today, much less 80 years ago,
Speaking of, you brought up the Frederick March, Mr. Hyde. That one was also pre-code and has some really shocking content in it.
And they didn't put everything in it. I mean, Kicks this little orphan.
Yeah,
and they took things out. That we only have stills of. But if you could bring back one lost classic, I think for me it would probably be London After Midnight.
Midnight, yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah,
me too.
Yeah. There was some rumors last year that maybe somebody, and I guess with lost classics like that, there's always rumors that it's in somebody's private hands, and they're just waiting for the copyright, or something to be able to capitalize on it.
It seems like about once every 8 years, there's some article that comes out that says the last copy's been found. And I'm always the big skeptic that's like,
are you interested at all in working with public domain? Anything?
Say again?
Are you interested at all in any future projects working with any public domain stuff?
Yes.
I mean, are we going to see Steamboat Willie appear in Wulf and Batsy or something?
The only thing like that I'm sort of interested in, I'm a huge fan of the pre-code horror comics.
And
so
like all the EC stuff?
Definitely EC, but I also love all of the EC imitators because there were some great ones.
Avon and
Avon, the Harvey horrors. The Harvey horrors are probably the second best, but there's another company called Superior Comics from the early 50s, and they did a series called Journey into Fear. That had some really demented stories in it, and there's I'm probably giving too much away, but there's a couple of them in there that I have thought it'd be fun which those are in the public domain. It'd be fun to take some of those characters and sort of weave them into a Wulf and Batsy story. I could see how some of that could work.
And it'd be lost on most people unless they're really a deep diver into those type of comics.
That's the fun of it for me is if you know, you know, but if you don't know, you don't know.
Well, like with directors, right, or TV producers, they like to put those little Easter eggs in.
Definitely. I love that too.
I mentioned today there's a prop, and I forget what it is, a rocket ship or something. For all the sci-fi movies, you can look, and usually you find it there somewhere. They
Yes.
they put it in all the sci-fi movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Definitely.
so what is your holy grail? Do you have a large comic book collection besides
Yes.
all the stuff that you've done?
Yes, I do have a
Yeah.
pretty
What would you
decent
call
comic
your holy grail in your collection
in
you
my
keep?
collection.
Yeah. Or maybe I
Um,
should put it this way, since I blew your mind a while ago. If you could only have one comic, Bryan, that you could save.
are, are you asking what's the holy grail of my collection, or what's a holy grail that I don't have that I would love to own?
That you have, but yeah, maybe one that you like to own too. I'd love to have Fantastic Four
The one
number
I
one.
have, I almost don't want to give it away because I was going to do a video on it.
Oh, okay, all right,
So
fair
not to
enough.
be not to be dodgy or evasive, but I was actually thinking about doing a video and showing it off, because you know how we collectors are. We love to show our best
That's fine.
collectible.
You don't have to tell us. It was good of you to join us tonight, Bryan.
I got one. I got
I'm
one that
gonna
I know would
kick
blow a lot of
you.
horror fans' minds.
What's one you're looking for?
One that I would love to have that I do not have would be Amazing Fantasy 15. The
Okay,
first Spider-Man's first appearance. I know everybody wants, that's a pedestrian answer. Everybody says that,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I love Spider-Man, and when I was like 15, my local comic book store had a copy of it that they got in, and it was $400
yeah,
in the 80s. And
yeah,
I even said to my dad, I was like, Dad, I know it sounds crazy to you,
right, yeah,
but I'm telling you, if you will buy this for $400, this will be worth a lot of money when I'm grown up.
yeah, yeah. And you would have been
Now
right. I
obviously I
mean,
want it. Obviously I want it because I love Spider-Man. But I'm telling you, for real.
it's
And of course, he
there's
thought I was crazy. You don't spend
there's
$400
three
on a comic.
things in condition. There's three things in collecting: condition, condition, condition. It's
Yes.
kind of like I used to do prison work, and there's three things you have to look at: security, security, security.
I
That's all
bet.
they care about, is security. Nobody
Right.
gets out alive
Right.
unless they're, released. But uh, even if they have a riot and they take you
Yeah.
hostage, they're not going to negotiate for you. It's all about
Right.
keeping them right where the judge wants them,
Right.
and unless they're transferred to another prison. But same, I mean, if you had a let's say a 67 Mustang, and you wanted the little old lady from Pasadena, and she had maybe 20,000 miles on it
Mm-hmm.
in all this time, and kept it in spruced up shape, or you had one that had been driven the whole time and
Mm-hmm.
maybe had 50 shades of Bondo on it,
Yeah.
which is going to be worth more, the one
Right.
in the better condition. So
Right.
it's unfortunate, but that's kind of what we're ruled by, in coins or
Mm-hmm.
cards or comics is condition.
I can tell you about a few things I have that are bragging
Okay.
pieces. I do have the first appearance of Wolverine, Hulk 181. I do have
Oh,
the
that's not his. No,
well,
it's
it's his
Lee.
first
Oh,
full story appearance. I knew you were gonna get me.
right. Well, I mean, I've got 180, but not 181. But yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
waited too long on those.
Well, I got the X-Men annual one, the 1974, the classic one with them coming out of the cover, the
Oh
group
yeah,
of them.
Gil
The
Kane.
first
Yeah,
Claremont one.
the
Oh no,
new
that's
X
Len
Men.
Wein. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Len, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I I
I have
got
them.
I do not have the first appearance of the Lizard. That's another holy grail I would love to get. X
Ooh,
or
I've got a
Amazing
reprint
Spider-Man.
that's a double cover with that, with the Ditko
Amazing.
cover.
What is
Number
that?
6. Number
6,
6.
right?
Yep.
Amazing Spider-Man 6. I'd love to have that one because I love the Lizard.
Yeah.
Uh, One of my favorite Marvel characters, villain or otherwise. I love him. Um,
Yeah.
I do have his second and third appearances in the original issues, 44 and 45, and
That's
then
good. Yeah.
76 and 77. I have all 10 of the original Bernie Wrightson Swamp Things, and I mean, I, don't- I'm afraid to say
Stellar
near
shape.
mint.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to say near mint, but they are damn nice copies. I mean, they look
Right.
brand new. But I
Yeah.
got all 10 Wrightsons. Um, I do have a lot of pre-code horror comics from the 50s, including some ECs. I got very lucky with that. There was a point where, do you remember, there was an independent comic book series that came out called Tales Too Terrible to Tell. And it wasn't really it was in comic book format, but it wasn't really a comic book. It was almost laid out like a textbook. But it was the first place where I really saw a lot of the off EC pre-code horror comics. It had all this information about them. First place where I really learned a lot about them. Late 80s, early 90s, I think this came out. Might have been somewhere in the 90s it came out, I believe. But anyway, that's where I kind of learned about the other pre-code horror titles. So I started going to conventions and looking for these things. And that was right when I was working in animation. I was starting out in animation, and we're talking 2000s now, somewhere in there, 2005 to 2010 or something like that. I'd been working in animation for a while. I was making decent money. I could afford to buy some cool stuff, and I started looking for those pre-code horror comics at conventions because I thought these are the ones they'll never reprint. Because sure they do reprints of the ECs because they're famous, but these things nobody's heard of them, so they'll never reprint these things. Right. I got to buy the originals. So I started shopping for them at the conventions and started buying nice copies of a lot of pre-code horror comics, and it was only like after I got all the ones I wanted that all these reprint books started coming out, like Craig Yo's books and the PS Art book.
Wally Wood did some stuff like that too for obscure.
Yeah. And they were doing all these reprints, and suddenly everybody in the world knew about them. And all of a sudden they started vanishing from the conventions, and you just weren't seeing them anymore. But when I was finding them, they were reasonable prices.
I mean, I started, hitting the golden age stuff and things like that. With like I got Young Men comics, and I didn't know because it had Captain America and Bucky, it had Submariner, and it had Toro and Human Torch. So what else you want? It was, it had all the ones from the early 50s, and I took it back to the convention room, our room there in Chicago, because it was the Chicago Comic-Con back in 85 and 86. 85 is when I picked up 4 issues, and the only one I couldn't find the previous year, I picked up the next year. And I opened it up, and John Romita Sr., who was there, did the artwork to Captain America. And I took it to him when he was, after a panel or whatever, he was going to be signing, meeting people. And I took him, and his wife was there, and he said, "Look, Virginia, this is stuff we did when we were dating." He hadn't seen it since the early 50s. It was a wonderful experience, to watch him just, look at his Captain America work from the early 50s that he probably had not thought about since he did it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a great moment, to be able to, as a fan, to add something, give something back to him, even though it was just, I had went up there with a short list of books that I wanted to look for, and there was one dealer that had 4 out of the 5 books. Nobody had the 5th book, and so I had to get that next year, the next year. But I got him to sign them, and wonderful experience, with the man, and do you think comics really took a turn around that time? As you know, the pre-code, a lot of people don't know, we've got the authority code. They had to go to Congress. They had books, but they had comic book burning. Of course, that was during the McCarthy era, and they were saying that comics contributed to juvenile delinquency. And then you look at the EC stuff where they had eye trauma, but I can go back to the 20s with surrealism, and see Man Ray film of it's not an actual. You think it's due to the cutting, the human eye, but it's actually a cow eye. Unless you studied art, you don't know what we're talking about. But it's
famous clip, famous shot.
Yeah, shocking, even back in the 20s. So, I mean, the Sign of the Cross. Have you seen that? Or Cecil B. DeMille movie? That's where she takes a milk bath. She's, and you get to see cleavage.
Sign of the Cross.
Like that.
Well, gosh,
is it Sign of the Cross?
Has a few moments like that. Pretty
Yeah,
close.
yeah. Whereas he's, not only disrobing it, but sniffing it. It's like Joe Biden all over again.
I don't insult King Kong like that.
Okay, all right. I
I
won't.
saw
Yeah.
I saw the original King Kong on a big screen.
Did
I
you?
went to this was when I was in art school in the 90s. I went to a really great little convention in Pittsburgh, and they had a huge old-fashioned movie theater there. And Ray Harryhausen was the guest, which was pretty cool.
Oh
And
wow.
he had the
Yeah.
original armature, the King Kong armature with him, and some of his models from his movies.
That's
so I got to
awesome.
meet Harryhausen, and Bob Burns was there too. He owns the Kong skeleton.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he was an actor himself in a gorilla suit,
oh yes, he
among
was.
other things, right?
Yep.
He
And
did the original Ghostbusters on Saturday, right? In that
yes,
suit.
that's true. That's
Yep.
true. He did.
Yep.
But they had at this convention, they had a screening in this big movie theater with Harryhausen and Bob Burns in the crowd of the original King Kong, and seeing that movie projected up on a huge screen was fantastic because
He
there's
was,
so many.
with Ray. I've heard commentaries. Him and Ray Bradbury, his good friend, they were,
Yep.
around that same age, and they Kong just blew them away. It was right
Yeah.
at the height of the Depression where people were starting to really feel it, but people were lining up for some escapism, to plop down their nickel to go see it. It was the Star Wars of its day, really.
Yeah, that was their Star Wars.
It was, it's as they said, the first big monster movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it must have been. I mean, you put that up on IMAX. I mean, just that they took from Dorie's artwork and the mysterious Skull Island and here. Couldn't wait. Just like, and I've heard other people, I couldn't wait as a kid to get to the Stegosaurus charging at them, and they had to shoot him dead, and just the way, I mean, Meryl C. Cooper said they invented 9 different processes, patented 9 different processes to film that through multiple layers, little rocks here, a little shrubbery there, and back here's the dinosaur, the matte painting of the background. It was ingenious. And if that had failed, RKO would have went under.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, here's a trivia question for you.
Okay.
You'll probably know. What's the movie that they were filming at the exact same time on the exact same jungle sets with Fay Wray and Robert Armstrong?
I thought you said this was going to be hard. That is Most Dangerous Game.
There you go. Can I say something?
Yeah.
So in Wulf and Batsy issues
with McCrae and Ray. Yeah.
That's true. In Wulf and Batsy issue 7, I have a little tribute to Kong.
I did notice that. Yep. Yes. Yeah.
Because they're in a movie theater reminiscing about old movies. So
that is the scene that actually Harryhausen that they did first or whatever that McCrae did or not McCrae, but
Willis O'Brien.
Bryan.
Willis O'Brien.
There we go. Yeah, Willis O'Brien. I would have loved for his creation to actually been made,
Yeah. That was the project he was working on before Kong, and that's the one that convinced this Miriam C. Cooper and shows that to say this is the way to do the Kong.
I watched on YouTube, and maybe you've seen it, a comparison between why is Lost World so substandard, the 1925, I think it was, silent version, Lost World, with that deals with similar themes than King Kong, and then him. You gotta love it, man. Taking a little guy and just not only putting him in the mud, but just not just stomping him, but just
I like it when he eats the guy in his mouth.
Yeah, when it's like you see that a couple times, even in New York, right? Somebody got it in the mouth. They had a giant. They actually built that to scale to take on a truck to different theaters and stuff. We can't even imagine, Brian, the way it was with the big marquees, and it was a big event, and theaters.
And also when there's nothing else like it in the background, no other movies are like that. That also makes a big difference too.
Absolutely.
You're not jaded.
I just, I was 12 years old. I'm like Dan Lawless and age, and who else is my age around here? Anyway, we were 12 years old going to see Star Wars, and sit all the way to the back. It was packed, and that was after 33 weeks of showing. It would go on for another year and a half or whatever. I mean, look, that was the D-Day landing. I don't think you're ever going to see a mass landing like that again in movies. Not with streaming. So we've seen something, and I remember, actually some of the early TV was wiped. It was done live, or it was not saved. And I've actually seen some episodes on TV that would never be seen again because they wiped them.
Oh,
they're gone.
Yeah.
Well,
like
so
the Vampire show is like
we'll
that,
never see anything like Star Wars again. People don't realize that.
That's true. I mean, I was born in 72, so I was about 5, and my parents did take me to see it. And
I don't see a movie ever being in theaters like a year and a half, 2 years, ever again.
Right. Yeah.
Not with the way things are set up now. That was something unique to our lifetime. That at the time you knew it was a big event, but you can't take it all in of what the ramifications were. I mean, look how Star Wars alone changed the course of movies and how they're made, because of the special effects that later he would take that money and develop with. And there's a lot of movies that we would never see today without the developments that that Lucas would make with his industrial light and magic. It's changed the whole landscape of movies. What's going to change the whole landscape of comics? And if you say Wulf and Batsy, I'm going to slap you down.
I'm not that arrogant.
Okay.
Wulf and Batsy is a throwback to the old stuff. It's not revolutionary, other than the fact that nobody else is doing anything maybe quite like it. I know that there's other indie horror comics coming out, but I don't know. There's something about the demented sense of humor in the old pre-code horror comics that is as entertaining to me as the scary parts.
Is that what you're trying to enter? Well, I mean, with horror, you have to, pace it out, right? You have to have those comedy beats. Otherwise, you wear your audience down. You wear them out.
I mean, there's definitely an absurdist humor,
Yeah, I mean, look, man, if that was on the newsstand, you don't think that would catch somebody's eye?
No pun intended.
Oh, well, no pun intended, actually. Yeah. I mean, I mean, you know how to engage with the imagery, the strong imagery.
Thank you. Here we have a gorilla suited axe murderer.
And I mean, a gorilla, even though it might be an axe murderer, guy in a suit, like Burns, oh man, I see you got Dracula back there or something. Are those NECA? Are those NECA things? Yeah.
Yeah, I love the NECA figures.
Yeah, they're nice for the price, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm addicted completely to the NECA monsters.
The only ones that I've gotten really are the Kong. I could have picked up a Mummy on sale, and I thought,
I got the Kong. I got the Mummy. The ones I'm most excited about. I got them, but I ordered a second set because I want one to keep in the box and one to take out of the box because the boxes are so nice. But it's the NECA did the Frankenstein, Wolfman, and Mummy as in the style of the old 1980s Remco monster figures. Where they were glow in the small ones. They did glow in the dark large ones like this.
You probably got the little reaction ones too, don't you? Like some of the reissues.
I do have those, but I don't think those hold a candle to the old Remco ones from the 80s because I still got those, and the sculpting on those things was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So NECA, knowing what fans love, they made big versions of the.
And not just that, I mean, I don't have all of them. I've just got 4 of the Kong ones. I know there's another one with a biplane or something. I got to get that one. But it's you got a black and white version, you got a color version, you got one with a pterodactyl. You got.
I got that. I got the normal Kong, and there was Kong by himself. That was the first one they came out with, and then they did those other ones. And of the other ones, I got the one with the prehistoric animals with him.
Yeah.
Because I love creatures.
I mean, so they're not just doing the one; they're doing. I guess since they had the licensing, did you see the Gorgo that that Titan Creations came out with that had the little. It was
Oh
all
wow.
over Twitter. They had this is the extra head here.
Hmm.
And they do have hinged jaws that will open up
Oh
and stuff.
wow,
But
that's great.
you know Gorgo? You
Oh
remember
yeah.
Gorgo?
Yep.
It had a baby Gorgo with it. They've got like little
Yes.
biplanes that
That's
I
great.
mean little bitty biplanes. We were kind of are you a Godzilla fan? I guess you are, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. See,
Can I
Shadowhawk,
show you something
he's
real quick?
sure. Yeah.
One second.
Okay.
I think you'll like this.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's the 60s or early 70s. I guess 60s, huh?
1974.
Okay, 74. All right. I know he
Godzilla.
did. Is that the one that jumps up and down and looks kind of silly?
Well, they all do that a little bit.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
But this is the 1974 Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla version.
Oh, okay. If
And
if
that
you're
likeness, I think, one of the best likenesses on a Godzilla figure I've ever seen.
it is, it's nice detailing, man. That
They've
is
even
nice.
they've even done things like put in the imperfections of the suit. Like he's got the little wobbly finger here.
Oh,
No,
does
wait, which
he?
hand is
Okay.
it? This one. This one.
Wow. Okay.
And the rumples and the.
Now, who made that? Who made this?
This is a Japanese company. I don't remember the
Oh,
name.
okay. Oh, okay.
It was being made available for order through American figure sellers, but it
Why?
sold out so fast.
Why are they doing the back plates in pink now? You think, Brian?
Well, I think there was a movie or a show where they glowed pink
Yeah. Now,
recently,
have
but
you
I haven't
seen
seen that one yet.
Shin Godzilla? Do you like Shin Godzilla, where he
Yeah, it's
morphs?
all right. Not one of my favorites, but I do like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Somewhere's Gorgo's around here somewhere.
But anyway, yeah. So this one was available through American sellers, but it sold out really fast, and then it was on the secondary market for crazy prices. And then my buddy Josh Howard says, you can still get it for the original price if you order it directly from Japan. So I
Wow.
found
Yeah.
that link and ordered it from them. They delivered it like in, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, and got it for the normal price. And it's one of my favorite Godzilla figures I've ever owned.
Yeah.
I have other ones, but this might be my new favorite. He's phenomenal.
Now what about, I think when you do that suggested horror, like I was talking about with Jim Aparo, kind of did in Adventure Comics with the Spectre, where people are kind of like killed off, you might see the silhouette, the shadow of what's going on, but they don't show it directly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know probably my first rated R movie to see. It's hard to really tell because I was so young, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Well, you never
Right.
really got to see what you thought you saw.
Right. It was all
There
implied.
would be people swear they saw him hit or her hung up on the
Mm-hmm.
hook, or it was all suggested, and your
Mm-hmm.
mind filled in the gaps. Then you get to the 80s with Michael Myers, and you actually see penetration. And I thought that a lot of that was, and Freddy, I liked some of it, but I thought it was overkill and unnecessary. You're kind of nailing it down to one thing. I think suggested horror is much more scarier to me.
I like different things at different times, but I have to confess, I was a kid of the early 80s.
Yeah,
I
get it.
I was reading Fangoria magazine.
Yeah.
Every one of those bloody, gory special effects.
But Famous Monsters was kind of my jam, and then Fangoria, like you're talking about, was the bloody version.
Yeah.
The more updated, for
and
for
when
the
and
gore
when you're
fan.
10,
Right.
when you're 10, that's like wow.
Yeah, I mean, my very first comic magazine was a Vampire Tales, and it had shots of like Count Yorga where they had bite marks and blood
Yes.
and something sticking out of his neck, and and my father's like looking at you, really, kids are drawn to that. I guess because I've never seen anything like it.
Right.
Same thing with my first comic. It was a Werewolf by Night annual Giant Size annual #2 that had Frankenstein monster, but it also had Satanist on the cover, upside down cross, and human sacrifice. So kids are just drawn to that stuff.
Well, we were talking also earlier. We mentioned Creep Show. I was super into that movie when it came out. I was 10 when it came out, 82. And
Right.
I got the Bernie Wrightson Stephen King comic book adaptation, bought that with my allowance. And there's some graphic violence in that comic. You know,
What I
it's,
remember about that movie is the cockroach story, where it's
yeah,
full of cockroaches.
yeah.
Yeah,
All the
uh,
stories in that one are great. But
yeah,
that was an early comic for me that did have some really graphic violence in it.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I think my parents were more worried about the curse words in it than the violence, because my parents were sort of like that's just silly, over the top, kiddie nonsense. But because it never happens, right? So,
what,
but
what,
we don't
what,
want him
what,
cursing.
what does your family think about your collecting?
Oh, I think they think he'll grow out of it one of these days.
Fat chance.
Right,
Uh,
right.
yeah, you get bit by the bug, and it's hard to lay it
I
down sometimes.
I think when I started making a living doing art, that's when they stopped worrying about me trying to make a living doing art.
That's when you get validation at some
Yeah.
point,
When,
right? He's a
when I was able to
professional.
buy a house, they were like, "All right, you're probably okay. You're not going to go to
Yeah.
jail or be a drug addict."
When it comes to your animation stuff, Brian, anything that I'm sure that we would know just by title that you've worked on?
Um, let's see. My first job in animation was working on a show called Roughnecks, the Starship Troopers Chronicles. It was an
Mm,
animated show based on Starship Troopers.
that was Van
90,
Hooven, right, or whatever his name is.
yeah.
That was the CG animation, right?
I
That
worked
you
on the
talked.
animated show at Sony Animation.
That was kick ass. I bought that on VHS and then later on disc.
Did you
Those,
really?
yeah, those were great, man. I
There was
love that stuff.
Well, one of the things they did, I'll tell you a little trivia fact about that show. There was a point where they were getting a little behind schedule, and they needed faces for the background characters and supporting characters, and they started just going around photographing people who worked on the show. And and most of them ended up just being little bit part characters.
Hmm.
But actually, the one that they used my picture for, there was an episode where one of the main characters, one of the sergeants in the military, his his son comes into the group
Yeah.
because he's the sergeant's son, and then he's a jerk, and none of the other soldiers like him, and he has to learn how to work with the team, and blah blah blah. Character's name was Max Bruto, so they used my face for that character. So if you
Oh
want
wow.
so that's the one episode where somebody they took a picture of in the studio for the character in the show was actually had a large part and had dialogue and stuff.
So it's kind
Although,
of like drawn in tier where you actually participate and have dialogue.
yeah, so I
Kind
was
of like,
actually like,
yeah.
I mean, it wasn't me doing the acting or dialogue, but they used my
Right.
face as the model for the character, and
Yeah.
so of course
That was a
that
that
was the
was a
joke
great
was, of
series. That
course,
was a
that was the
great
joke.
series.
Perfect casting to have a jerky character from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Is that
but
going to be your legacy, or is it going to be Wolf and Batsy, you think?
I hope it's Wolf and Batsy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. I also worked on Transformers Prime,
Oh
where we
yeah.
introduced, which was a animated show where we brought in zombie robots.
Now I know with some people I should start bowing down and worshiping about right now because they're big Transformer fans. That came after me. I'm old
Yeah,
enough to remember GoBots a
right,
little
right.
bit, a little bit. Yeah.
I
Uh,
worked at Disney on Tigger and Pooh for a long
okay.
time. That was one of the most fun animation jobs I ever had. Um,
Yeah.
I worked on. I actually was on the first season of a show called Elena of Avalor at Disney, which became a very popular Disney princess show for little girls. But it's before I had a little girl, so I wasn't able to
Yeah.
appreciate that aspect of it. But I was there for the first season, helped kind of bring that show around. And what else did I work on? There's one great thing I worked on a couple of years ago that was sort of a samurai, rated R, like adult samurai action thing with monsters and like samurais in fantasy world type stuff where he's fighting monsters and there's blooded violence and everything. And of course, they
Yeah.
gave me all the scary scenes to work on, but that thing hasn't come out yet. Um, what?
Yeah, a lot of
Although,
the work you do for commercials, they never make it to market, right? You've
oh
probably
no,
done a
that's
lot of
not.
work that's never seen the light of day.
No, that's not really. I haven't had that issue. The I
Okay.
will say one project I worked on that never came out. It was very early in my career. It was right after Starship Troopers. Actually, I worked on a show that was developed by David Spade, the comedian,
Hmm. Hmm.
and this is the late '90s. He had or early 2000s. He had it was probably '99 2000. He had all these big name actors and big name comedians doing voices on it. Like David Duchovny was huge at the time because of X-Files. He was a voice on it in one of the episodes I worked on. A lot of the John Lovitz, I think, had a voice on it. Some of these comedians that were kind of in the Adam Sandler, David Spade kind of world were all kind of on this show. And I worked on storyboards for that show for an entire year. We did the entire season. It was like time for the show to end, and they screened it for the guy who was the boss of Sony Animation or whatever, and he decided he didn't like it, pulled the plug on it, never seen the light of day, never heard the title associated with David Spade. It's never been mentioned. I've never seen it brought up anywhere in the press ever. It's like it's like they pulled the plug and put it in a vault, but I couldn't believe the amount of money that they burned to create that thing and paying all of us for a year. Yeah. And then they just decided they didn't like it and said, no, we're not doing this. And it's never seen the light of day. I've worked on so much stuff in animation I forget. I worked on He-Man, the Masters of the Universe in 2002, that version, which was a fan favorite version. I worked on Stuart Little. I worked on Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Wow.
I have an animation website too, actually. If you would like the link to that, it's got
sure.
You can see some of my credits. I can throw that in Twitter for you.
Okay.
On the DMs.
Chat. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah. It's now you're not old enough in animation really to go back to actual animation cell work, are you?
No, although we were working on with pencil and paper for the first probably 10 years of my career, because I got in 99, and well, not quite 10 years. We didn't start using digital tools until 2005 or 2006, maybe. It was after I did Tigger and Pooh. That was the last show I worked on where it was pencil and paper, and that was 2000. That was.
What's your favorite?
What's
your favorite?
It was.
What's your favorite Disney movie, Bryan? You think?
Oh gosh.
I mean, traditionally done, I've got to say Jungle Book, because that was the last thing Walt Disney worked on, and he had all his animators that had been with him for like 20 years. I mean, when you look at King Louie moving around, the fluidity of it. Of course, I like Robin Hood. I like 101 Dalmatians. They're all wonderful stuff that I grew up with. But I asked a friend that, and he said Lion King, and I said, "What the hell? You're going to pick Lion King out?" And he's like, "Well, it's because my children are young, and I watched it with my children." I get that.
I get that.
Yeah.
I worked on
Fantasia.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was going to answer your question.
Okay.
I actually love Sleeping Beauty, because despite the girly title, there's a lot of really cool stuff in that one with the dragon and there's like orcs and goblins and things like that in it.
Right.
I love Pinocchio because that one gets weird. I love Snow White because of the witch and that great scary scene.
That actually Maleficent was it taken for that, or was it Snow White? Can't remember.
Maleficent, I believe it was from Sleeping Beauty, right? Correct?
So, was it Sleeping Beauty? Okay.
That's the witch from. But gosh, I'm trying to think. You know what? I'll tell you. I have to admit, as a childhood nostalgic favorite, I loved Lady and the Tramp, because that was popular when I was a kid. I loved Pete's Dragon.
That's a great one. That's animation and live action, right? Combined.
Yeah. I watched that one a million times as a kid. I loved I loved the Legend of Sleepy Hollow that Disney did.
Oh yeah, with Ichabod Crane and all the kind of slapstick, I mean, just Ichabod, the way they did him, thin and with the big shoes, and I don't know, it's just
Actually, I just thought of something, a little a Disney to connection, which is I think I learned how to draw rats, scary rats, from Lady and the Tramp. There's a scene in that movie where they throw the tramp out or whatever, they don't like him, and a rat gets into the baby's nursery and it's going to bite the baby, and the lady says, "Save her, save her!" And Tramp runs in and kills the rat, and it's a heroic moment that makes him, everybody likes him again, or
Right.
whatever the story was. But I just remember the way they drew the rat in Lady and the Tramp was so creepy to me as a kid. To this day,
Yeah.
I still when I draw rats in my horror comics, I'm trying to make them look like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the villains that I mean, it's the witch and Wizard of Oz, it's Cruella de Vil, it's things that stick. The child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
Yeah,
horrifying.
yeah,
It's they really stick with you, and over time we kind of forget that. But as a kid, some of that stuff was just terrifying to watch. Really,
yeah. Do you
you know,
remember what was it called? Was it well, it was the story of Dr. Sin.
right?
Disney did a live action movie of it.
Uh-huh.
Captain Clegg. You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
I
Uh,
do. Yeah,
Hammer did a movie called Night. Was it Night Ride? No, Night Riders, or why am I blanking on
I
this?
know what you. Yeah, it was.
The guys that dressed up like like skeletons and on skeleton horses, and they
On
go out and
horses, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, Night Creatures is what I think Hammer called it. Night Creatures, is that right?
Something
Something
like
like that.
that. Yeah,
But anyway,
Matt might know. Yeah,
but Disney did a movie of it. I think it was called The Legend of Dr. Sin or something like that.
yeah.
But it was I only saw that one when I was a kid. I haven't seen it since. But I loved that one. I remember thinking that.
What did you? What was my next question? Shoot.
That's going to drive me
Uh,
crazy trying to remember the exact title of that, because that I don't think I have it right. It's anyway. Some
yeah,
Disney fan out there will know it.
yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about. I've seen the sequences. It
Yeah,
looks like rotoscoping, kind of.
yeah,
I don't know, like Lord of the Rings, like Ralph Bakshi.
yeah.
What do you think about all that? That was wonderful. I thought in the '70s
Well, my
with
favorite
the
boxing movie is Fire and Ice.
yeah, yeah,
That's the
and
best to me.
you had a lot of rotoscoping, at least with the vehicles early, with in Flash Gordon done by Filmation.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
and I did not realize that Alex Toth was with Hanna-Barbera for so long,
Yeah,
and then through that something separate. I didn't realize that Gray Morrow. I don't know if you know Gray Morrow stuff, but
yeah. He was a horror artist.
well, he did the '67 Spider-Man cartoon.
Oh,
He
was he involved in that? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
he did basically, and then Jack Kirby, he did in between
Thundar.
work. Well, he did Thundar, but he also did Fantastic Four and some Scooby Doo stuff in the '70s, and it
Yeah.
goes all the way back to the '30s in Popeye as a fill-in art
Oh wow, that's cool.
animator. Yeah, so you got to put Jack Kirby in there with the great animators too.
Hmm.
In a way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, he had a limitless creative, you know. So you draw upon these golden age pre-horror and other or movies like you like King Kong, like you put the
Hmm.
homage in and stuff.
Yeah.
They actually filmed that. I was going to say earlier with the they actually filmed that first, did that first to kind of sell the movie, was the fight scene between Kong and the
Oh,
T-Rex.
okay. Right.
They actually did that first to kind of sell the movie for
Hmm.
RKO. Um,
Hmm.
and John Wayne, he was doing movies up to like 1946 or into the later 40s for RKO, and all that could have been ended.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't know that, but John Wayne did mostly some extra and stand-in stuff, but he was in silent movies prior to
Hmm.
1930,
Hmm.
and he did a lot of his early stuff as RKO, and that would have never happened if Kong wasn't a success. They would have been bankrupt or absorbed, bought out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's what's the future of comics, Bryan? I mean, comics are kind of niche, aren't they? With all your experience, what are you doing? Are you so cush comfort that you don't need the money, that you're kind of doing comics now? What the hell?
No, comics are just an obsession that I do on the
Yeah.
side of my day job and family life. Whenever I
Okay.
can find a spare few minutes in the
Yeah.
late evenings or weekends.
Yeah.
That's when I try to do my comics.
I meant to ask you how your loved one's doing. I hope they're doing better than the other day. You had mentioned that you
Oh,
had
yeah,
some
right.
health issues.
Yeah, I think we were talking about doing this show at some point earlier, and
Had
I
to
couldn't do it
reschedule.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, my
Mhm.
wife had to go out of town to take care of a sick
You're
relative
a
on her
hard
side.
get, Bryan. You're a hard get. You fight on the rod too much. It's hard to hook you.
Well, it's like between day job stuff, comic stuff, promoting this
Right.
campaign,
Yeah.
having a 6-year-old. It's
Yeah.
like I have
Oh
to be very
wow.
strategic with my free time.
Yeah, I didn't realize your daughter was 6 years old. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
full-time job right there, Bryan.
Yeah. I feel like I've got 4 full-time jobs
Yeah.
right
You
now.
might wake up with 4 feet one day. It's like, whoa, I'm mutated.
Right.
Well, my favorite character it was George Perez, Avengers that really got me into comics, and I love the Beast.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
kind of like a graduation, werewolf and night to another hairy character.
Right.
The Blue Beast
Right.
version, and he's kind of got a Jekyll and he further mutates, right? Because he was
Hmm.
hairless at one time, and I had one question to ask Stan Lee when I met him. And I said, why, this is when he went to X Factor and they changed him back to his non-furry self. And I said,
That's true.
why did the Beast lose his hair? And he turns back to Tom DeFalco or Roger Stern, whoever it was, and says, the Beast is bald. He didn't know, he hadn't been keeping up with it, but, that was I'm one of these. I like these teen books. A lot of characters, but
Yeah.
I mean, my first Spider-Man was the start of the Clone Saga, not in the '90s. The original 149 with the Jackal, and where it had Spider-Man battling Spider-Man on the cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just caught me. That the concept of one Spider-Man battling another Spider-Man. That's different. Never seen that before. I mean,
Yeah.
comics opened up a big vista to but you can't just wander in anymore. I always talk about this, Bryan. You just can't wander into a pharmacy, a grocery anymore. 7-Eleven, like you said, we never had 7-Elevens around here, unfortunately, but I always wanted the Slurpee cups,
Right.
And wanted just to try one of those ices,
Yeah.
That was back in the day where you couldn't go to the mall. I can go to the mall and get an icy now. It's no big
Yeah.
thing. But back then it was like, I want an icy,
Yeah.
it was like, not even VHSs were around,
Right.
VHS
Yeah.
tape. A lot of that stuff, I realized that, when VHSs came and Blockbuster Video and everything, it was like, I've seen that old cartoon from the 60s, it brought back memories.
Yep.
That was my first really exposure to superheroes on TV. We, or horror, when we were in school, you'd have Scholastic News or things that you could order. Book Day. Oh, and I felt bad because not all the kids could afford, and I was one that couldn't afford everything, but usually got something. And it was like mail call, your books came in. Whoa! I love that.
Yep.
And one of mine was like how to make, monster makeup with like, glue warts. And then you take a little Sharpie and gray it out, or, and stick it on your face. And then, or like a grocery sack Frankenstein head, that you would make. Love that stuff. And then, you get Dynamite magazine or something like that. And it would have like,
and
these mention of old movies like King Kong and Dracula and Wolfman versus Dracula and movies like that you go, I want to see that. And eventually I did get around to seeing all those classics, but till then I was like, man, these are the holy grails. I got to see that,
man, talk about a lost treasure from a lost age. I mean, when I was a kid in elementary school in the tail end of the 70s, the early 80s, they still had those magazines, Dynamite and Hot Dog, and of course at that time they were all full of pictures of Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica and Mork and Mindy and Dukes of Hazzard and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And but they don't really do stuff like that in kids' schools these days, I don't think. But
now I've got to ask you, one thing I love on a campaign. I've got one back there. I've got more.
Yeah.
Lunchbox. Are you going to do I know that's more involved. I mean, people are doing standees. It's not just about
trying to figure out how to do
anymore, is it? Yeah.
Of course, I'd love that. I mean, that's a staple and nostalgia.
You could go to work every day, huh? With your thermos. Hey. Everybody's doing the lunchbox. Maybe just start with a thermos.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I do want to try to figure out how to do more merch type stuff. The
give me $1 million. I'll do it all for you, right?
There you go.
Yeah. Trading cards are easy to make.
Right. But surprisingly more expensive to make than you think. But but people like them. And I would like to do more merch type stuff, but I got to figure out the logistics on some of those things because I mean, I would love to do more T-shirts, but the problem with those is you end up having all the different sizes.
Well, we can't all be Brian Polito with death, or we can't be we can't be like She over there on Kickstarter for the last 20 years, right? I mean, Billy Tucci's She, but they've been at this crowdfunding thing a lot longer than you and I. So yeah. Now, what kind of brought you over to fund my comic with Luke and them?
Very simply, it was so I'd been with Alterna for a while, and we'd been doing the comics, Wulf and Batsy and all their comics through Indiegogo. So I was gonna try to do an Indiegogo campaign, but I started looking. But I'd never done one by myself that I'd actually set up and run before. So that was a challenge and a little bit of a learning curve there. And when I tried looking at how to do that on Indiegogo, it just seemed like there were some technical things I had questions about, and there were also some glitchy things where I felt like it wasn't behaving the way I wanted it to. And there were, and I actually got really frustrated with just trying to make it cooperate and do what I wanted to do. And maybe I'm just computer illiterate or something, but there were things on there I couldn't quite get to work. And so a bunch of people started recommending Fund My Comic, and I looked into that, and I wasn't sure, but I said, well, what if I just pretend like I'm setting up a campaign page, like before I had anything ready, like let's just go on there and just look at their template and just see how it works. So I made an account on there, and I just started playing around with it just to see if I could do it, and it seemed much more user friendly. Also, Luke, who runs it, is very accessible. Whereas Indiegogo seems to have like no customer service at all. Like you send them a question. He puts
up tutorials on how to do stuff on there.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But I mean, any questions I sent to Indiegogo, it was like throwing them out the window. Like nobody would ever get back to me. So whereas Luke was right there. Like I could send him a question, and he would just very patiently and very politely get back to me and let me know. And of course I'd go, oh, of course, I should have known that. But he was there to answer those questions. And then then I started looking at the tutorial videos also because I didn't want to bug him too much. And then, was able to figure it out. And it just seemed like a much more user-friendly site, along with having the guy who runs it right there willing to answer your questions. And it's worked like a charm. It was very easy to set up, and my campaign took off great. I was worried about not having the same audience, but
I was going to say you got to be happy with the way that it really did take off there, didn't it?
Yeah, it had a great start. It was 100% funded within like 2 days and a few hours. Like I launched amazing. I launched it on the 7th on a Wednesday night at 8:00 p.m. And by Saturday morning, it was fully 100. It was over 100% funded.
Were you surprised?
Oh, very surprised. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if this thing was going to fall on its face. I didn't know if it was.
Well, it's a new
My
platform,
assumption.
right? Yeah,
What's that?
it's a new platform.
Yeah, well, there's that too. I wasn't sure. It's like
Yeah,
I wasn't sure how
yeah.
people were going to respond to the books. I wasn't sure how they were going to respond to my different reward
So
levels. I
you
didn't know
got
if it was.
you got no compunction about not coming back to Fund My Comic. You're probably going to stay on the Fund My Comic and further
I'll probably
endeavors.
stick with this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of people have suggested, after you do the Fund My Comic one, then maybe jump over and do the same campaign on Indiegogo and reach their
right,
or Kickstarter and reach their audience.
right.
Um, Maybe I will when I get a little bit more savvy at this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't,
Well, I'm really
not yet.
surprised with your animation background and working with computers much more than I did. I mean, uh, you know, I had a little basic, and I mean way back even when it was basic
Yeah,
language,
yeah.
and uh, yeah, I know of certain things, but it's like, yeah, just that never interests me. Art is what interests me, Brian. So I just like
hmm
I could go computers, which I really don't want, and my mind doesn't work that way. It's more creative
yeah.
than just, I know that it can be, I can remember the early days, in the college, they had this $100,000 computer there that sat there and nobody used it. There might have been
Wow.
one or two people, I think three people in the whole college, and none of them were students, knew how to operate the damn thing. It just sit there. It was a waste of money, university money. Early, after it sits there more than 2 minutes in computers, it's outdated,
Yeah,
you know?
that's true.
And there's something better that came on. I can remember going back into one whole room in the computer thing at the university, and it was all the old green screened apples,
Yeah.
and that was
hmm
before Apple really took off, had its second insurgence, and became the monster it is today. That
Yeah.
was just like the first wave of apples that came out. But by then, they
hmm
were getting a little dusty, a little old. That was
hmm
right, somewhere in there, they took off again, Apple
Yeah.
stock did and did some more things. But um, yeah, it's, I mean, that you talk about technology changing. How does comics change with it? I mean, is crowdfunding the answer, you think?
I don't know if it's the answer long
Yeah,
term, but it seems like the way to go now.
yeah, yeah,
Um, of course, it's like, we were talking earlier about the 7-Elevens and that sort of thing, and how you can't get comics at the grocery store or whatever. It's like, I
yeah.
think as much as I loved comic shops when I was a teenager, when they sprung up in the 80s,
Right,
um,
right.
it's probably the biggest mistake the industry ever made as far as keeping the business going, because it isolated everything down to this one little niche market.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when they took them out of the stores then too, and you couldn't just get comics at 7-Eleven or the grocery store,
Right.
that it's
The
that
little
made it.
digest of Archie's at checkout is
Yeah.
about all you see anymore.
The one, here's what it is now is, you've probably heard of Dog Man. These books
Mm,
are very popular. Um,
mm-hmm.
I was walking through Target with my little 6-year-old little girl, and she just, her eyes went right to it. I didn't even see it. Her eyes went right to it. She said, "Daddy, look at that!" And I had to look at it with her, and she starts looking at it. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is a comic book for kids, but it's in a little hardcover book format that's sort of
Yeah.
sized for a kid's hand."
Almost like the golden books we had as
Yeah, pretty
kids.
much. But
Yeah.
it is comics, and it is
Uh-huh.
selling at Target and places like that, and Walmart,
Uh-huh.
places like that. So it's like I guess that's the today's kids equivalent of us going to 7-Eleven and finding an issue of Batman on the spinner
So
rack.
so I guess we need to get creative with repackaging, is what you're saying.
I don't know. That's bigger than me right now.
Change the format.
Could be, yeah, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a unique American art form, and I would hate to see it. I think comics will always be around, but how relevant will they be is the kind of question of the day.
well, I think it's like I think people will always make stories with drawings,
Hmm.
and that is comics.
Cave
And
walls in my
yeah,
day. Yeah.
right, right. But I think, and also, I mean, for anybody who was a frustrated movie maker that doesn't have the money to make a movie, well, you can make a comic and tell that story. You know, there's a lot of people that are in it like that. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
people, you know, kids can make comics. You know, on
Right.
drawing them on their own little school notebook paper and stuff. It's
That's
like
what I used to do.
sure,
You know.
people are always going to make stories this way. It's just how are they going to be a mainstream product that sells, you know, that
Yeah.
is out
Yeah.
there.
What I loved about the spinner rack and things like that, you could go into a grocery store, pharmacy, they were everywhere. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
know, within reason. It was even and I didn't know that it was like I didn't see an X-Men movie book till like 2 years into collecting. I just
You're
never
right.
saw it on the particular stands I went to. So there it was even as much as the rack had on it, there were more titles out there
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't get to see everything and
Right.
missed some things, even missed stuff that was regularly on there. If I missed an Avengers issue, I generally knew it and it upset me, you know, or the annuals.
Yeah.
Uh,
You make a great point there because for me as a kid, the big revelation of comic book stores was up till then, I thought when I was only buying comics at the grocery store or the drug or the 7-Eleven spinner rack, I
uh-huh,
thought if you didn't get that issue when that was out that month on that spinner rack, it sold out. It was gone forever. As a kid, that was my understanding, right?
right, right.
Uh, uh, but when comic book stores came along, all of a sudden they had back issue bins, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
went nuts like that. I burned up all my allowance
I bet
because
you
it was
did.
like oh my gosh, you can get the ones you missed. That blew my mind as a kid.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well,
so then
you
that
know,
turned
to
into
me
that's how
though,
you turn into a collector.
it's just the kid, he's got his, you know, finger up his nose, he's picking his ear, whatever. And then all of a sudden, oh,
Right.
this light comes down and I have the power, you know,
Right.
whatever. It's like, wow, I have discovered a new universe. I've
Yeah.
discovered Wolf and Batsy or whatever it's called, Devil
Right.
Flyer. And for the very first time, Fantastic Four, Captain America, whatever. And you
Mm.
go, whoa. And it introduces you to a whole new universe. And you're
Yep.
like, whoa, I'm falling through space, you know. I'm all of a sudden Doctor Who or something. I don't know. It's you know, it changes your life. And you know,
Hmm.
then you come across a big treasury edition, you know, boom.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's
Oh
something
yeah.
new I've not seen. Or those little digests. And
Hmm.
and you're like, wow, this is something extra. So there was always constant discovery. And now kids walk in and go, you know, what, nothing. It's a desert. You
Hmm.
know, uh, comics can't change children's life like anymore. Like well, your daughter saw that one and was like, whoa,
Hmm.
instantly like a magnet. You
Hmm.
didn't even see it, but she was like, boom,
Yep.
right there with it, you know,
Yep.
Captain
And
Underpants and stuff
yeah,
like
well,
that.
same thing. And
Uh-huh.
the I have to say, like the book, the one she saw and fixated on was like number two in the series. So
Uh-huh.
me being the kind of collector I am, I'm like, get number one, get number one. And she's like, no, 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 I like this one. So of course, I got her both of them because I can't handle her having two, but not
Right,
one. So,
right.
but
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, she brought them. She's 6 years old. She read them cover to cover multiple times.
I didn't even know they were like a soap opera. Continue next month. I mean, even though it said next month, blah blah blah, I give you a title and sometimes a, you know, Doctor Do,
Yeah,
you know, and you're like, ooh, that ended good, but I want more. But
yeah,
I didn't know that you could come back another few weeks and, you know, get the next issue. It just happened by chance with me,
yeah.
you know, with Perez's art there and wanting to get the most bang for my quarter. It's like all the characters that I can get, you know, Avengers.
Hmm.
That's when Avengers early, you know, running on his stuff. And who's this Jack Kirby? I'd rather see a George Perez cover. Or who's this Rich Buckler, you know?
Well, yeah,
But
I
a
mean, I
lot of
think
fun stuff.
in those days, it's like buying comics and reading comics was almost like the same as like watching the Spider-Man cartoon or the Super Friends cartoon, where it's like you just caught whatever episode was on.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it was very random.
Yeah, very random. But you know, and that's when I had a big epiphany that wow, somebody's first superheroes might have been Super Friends. It might have been
Right.
Space Ghost. It might have been Johnny
Mm-hmm.
Quest. You know,
Yeah.
you never know. It might have
Mm-hmm.
been a rerun of the old Flesher Superman. You
Yeah.
know, great stuff with early rotoscoping. You know, it still holds
Mm-hmm.
up today, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wish they would almost go back to the old nostalgia Clark Kent with the glasses and the fedora hat and the suit and, you know, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And set it back in the 40s. I think that
Oh
would
yeah.
sell. You know,
Oh
if you
yeah.
stick with the source material, it will sell. But you
Yeah.
you get it over on Netflix or you get it over on the movies, and all of a sudden it's like, why don't we do this? And it's like,
Right.
no, why don't we not and just stick with 80, 90 years of material that's already
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. It's because they.
Update it, yes, but don't totally retool it.
Yeah, I've always thought that would be the best Batman movie was if they actually made one that was set in the 30s or 40s. But the reason they don't is because they're already worried about how expensive it's going to cost with the special effects, and now you want to make it a period piece too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look at you. Yeah, but there's been movies like that. What was that Captain
Well, they
whatever
don't
with
even
Judd
blink when
Law? Yeah,
it's a Dracula movie. Then they'll
yeah,
make it a period
yeah.
piece, right?
I
That has
did want to
special
ask you
effects.
about the Hammer films. Boom with the color for the very first time.
Yeah, yeah,
What'd you
yeah.
think about the horror films? Did they Hammer films? Did they kind of hold up to the Universal?
Love them. I love them.
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
know what's interesting about them is it's really funny. People today they get mad about remakes and that sort of thing. But
hmm
I've read stuff where people were having the same complaints about the Hammer movies when they first came out. Hammer
yeah,
movies, which are now considered classics, like
yeah.
the Christopher Lee
True.
Draculas. But when they first came out, people were saying you can't remake the classic Bela Lugosi
hmm
Dracula, the classic Karloff mummy. You can't do
Well,
it.
they're talking about making, and I think this is a mistake, Wizard of Oz and It's a Wonderful Life. There are
Mm,
certain movies I think you shouldn't touch, like on with the Wind,
that's true.
you know.
That is true. I agree with you. I agree with
But
you on
but
that.
they're few and far between. I
Yeah.
think actually Citizen Kane you might be able to remake, but I mean it's kind of lost, the actual story and the
But
thing that made that was innovative was the push in, pull out with the
yeah,
camera and the little
the technical
miniatures and
stuff.
and the passage of time,
Yeah, and the
you know,
silhouette shots and
where
things.
they're sitting at the table over the years and growing older,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know. I mean, innovative stuff at the time, but you get your daughter to watch some of the stuff, and the pacing is so slow to what their kids are like resilient, but they're faster paced nowadays, aren't they?
Well, not
Not totally,
not when they don't know better.
right?
I've shown my daughter a lot of stuff I thought would be too slow paced for her, and once it kind of catches its rhythm, she's into it.
Yeah, I
I,
mean, if
I
you isolate them away from their school group and you go check this out with Daddy, it will become absolutely, Herculoids or whatever. You gotta love it, man. I
she
I
loves
really think
Scooby
the
Doo.
'60s. I
It's
really,
not. It's
I
more.
mean, one thing I like to talk about, just about as much as I do comics, Brian, is animation, and I think '60s were because it was like, and Ted Kennedy killed it with the legislation. Again, censorship or whatever you want to call it, the violence in cartoons. Look, Johnny Quest is not going to warp my mind, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but and what was amazing is they released Johnny Quest on DVD, and I was like, oh yes, it's mine. And then it turned out when they released it on Blu-ray, the uncensored version. I'm like, what? My Blu-ray is censored? When the lizard guy's falling off and he's smack talking him, yeah, take that, you dirty, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They censor that out. How does that? Why do you even want to
Which
censor cartoons?
which one did they censor, the DVD or the Blu-ray?
The first release on DVD, and then they came out with a Blu-ray that I knew I had to get. I said, darn it, I got to buy it all again because the first one was censored.
Okay,
I
'cause I
want
have
it the way I saw it on TV
right. I have
without
the
any
Blu-ray.
alteration.
I
Huh?
have the Blu-ray
Oh, good. Yeah, that's the uncensored.
of
Yeah.
Johnny Quest. Yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah.
I watched. I love those cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, it's action adventure and everything in
Mm-hmm.
the '60s. Like, if I said Hawaii Five-O, you're going to say da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
They all had a theme song. you
Mm-hmm.
know, doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo,
Yeah.
doo-doo. You know, I mean, it's and that and Johnny Quest is the same way. You know, you immediately think of the music. You know, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think, and today we can't get any properties off the ground. You know, it's just I think I think they had a better grasp of it. You know, I don't know. A lot of those people were hard working people that even had uh I mean, from the very beginnings of entertainment and in vaudeville, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the people that were big on early TV in the 50s in America came out of vaudeville.
That's where Abbott and
Right?
Costello came from.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, Jimmy Durante, you name it. You know, even
Mm-hmm.
even Sammy Davis Jr. He's 4 years old, tap dancing up on the vaudeville stage. You know, uh, a lot of talented people. That's when you didn't have two nickels to rub together, and if you did, you probably get mugged. You know, it's like, for a nickel you could get a cup of Joe, being coffee, and a sinker being a donut.
Right.
I almost envy, seeing being like the kid, you know, uh, and I know different times, I wouldn't want to go back to Depression era times and have to live through that like Harryhausen and Ray Bradbury. But,
Sure.
to see King Kong like that and to see, but we got to see Star Wars like that,
Right.
and your kid will never get to see a movie experience. I mean, can you even imagine? I think the only movie that even approached a little bit of that was Passion of the Christ
Or Titanic, maybe.
or Titanic. Yeah, yeah, which beat out, in the Oscars. Of course, that's, you got to wonder
Mm-hmm.
how much, the Ten Commandments, which was the
Right.
remake of his silent classic. Cecil B. DeMille. Most people don't even know, did it twice, once in the silent
Mm-hmm.
era and once in the 50s. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love combining film, animation, comics. I think if you're into entertainment or the visual art form, you gotta expand it to all entertainment, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that makes sense.
yeah. I
I don't know
think
if I'm in a
one.
position to do that, but
I think it all complement. Well, I mean, you kind of admitted these things are kind of informing your comic book work, aren't they?
well, yeah, that's true. That's true. Sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It might be a
Oh, right.
really slight creep in, but
Yeah.
somehow it
Yeah.
works its way into your sequential artwork, like
Right.
that
Yeah.
like that King Kong homage that you did.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. I thought you were going in the other direction.
Oh, you
Um,
never know where I'm gonna go. You haven't found that out yet, Brian? I
I
hope I
thought
haven't ran you off. I never want to go on that. We joke around here. Telepathic Bunny came on, and he in a private DM group, which I'm in also. He said, "I just got I just I just got off Rex's channel being grilled for 2 hours." We laughed about that. You know, some people do think with my questions that they've been like, man, that, you know, uh, yeah. I mean, how much a comic book collector are you yourself
um,
nowadays? Is it just the back issue pretty much for you, or you
um,
probably you probably like a lot of the alternative stuff, right?
well, here's the thing with me is Marvel and DC have changed into something I no longer recognize.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not interested in them anymore, which is so sad because it's like I
yeah.
loved them so much for so many years, but
Hmm.
they've just changed. Um, and all my comic book buying money these days pretty much goes to reprints or old stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
we're living in a golden age in terms of reprinted stuff from before our
Well, these
time.
facsimile editions are doing bank.
Yeah.
Dan
And I mean,
Dido said, man, he was frustrated that their dollar or even the 3.99, whatever they price them out now, the facsimile issues were
mhm.
outselling some of the main titles.
Yeah. But I mean, also, I mean, we were talking about before about how, for a long time, the pre-code horror comics, for example,
Hmm.
were not being reprinted. But now, I mean, over the past 5 or 6 years, they've been coming out like crazy.
Yeah.
I got all the different Harvey Horror books in different hardcover collections. I got,
Yeah.
I got all the EC stuff. I got all the Superior comics, all those, even the Jungle Girl comics from the 40s have been reprinted. I got some of those, the Phantom Lady and Rula and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and so it's like, so instead of buying new modern stuff, all my comic book money and spending and reading has been just diving into all this stuff from before my time that is just, that's the kind of comics I love, and that's the way they used to make them even when I was a kid, but they just don't make them
And
that
you're
way.
kind of learning about comicology, you kind of 101, you're kind of learning
Yeah.
about what came before so that you can
Yep.
better appreciate what is coming out nowadays, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
we all owe, like Alex Raymond and
Mm-hmm.
Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and I mean,
Yeah.
World John Romita Senior, Junior, whatever. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I talked with Steve Root about passing the torch
Mm-hmm.
onto
Mm-hmm.
another. So there would come a time when Bryan goes, here,
Mm-hmm.
take the torch of Wulf and Batsy and run with it,
Right.
because you're going to age out and
Right.
eventually you're going to want to mentor and leave it to somebody who's going to carry on the great legacy of comics, aren't you?
Well, I mean, I haven't met that person yet.
Right. Yeah.
This
Well,
is
you're
the
young in the game yet, so
I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do have some friends like Josh Howard doing T-Bird and Throttle. Oh, Captain Caveman! I used to love him. But I've got friends like Josh Howard doing T-Bird and Throttle, great superhero book. I've
Yeah.
got Fabrizio Aiello, who does Horace H. Hoover. That's a great weird comic.
We've had him on here, and he liked. He's probably watching actually.
Yeah, I mean, so there's interesting modern stuff coming out, but you got to look for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, comics came out of the dailies in newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
Remember newspapers, folks? And kind of came out of the pulps, which were like 10-cent, big, thick, cheap entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do what Alterna's doing? I mean, they're doing, the cheap comics, cheap as you can, probably, and on newsprint, which is very hard and difficult for, find a reliable printer that'll even do that nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But the offset printing or whatever, how do we make it cheap and affordable? I mean, now we're kind of doing these boutique things, aren't we?
Yeah, printing costs have really gotten difficult.
Yeah.
But before I was with Alterna, I was self-publishing Wulf and Batsy from about 2008 all the way up till 2017, and I was doing them as trade paperbacks because I found
bless you. I did want to circle back to that because you published through different publishers, right? Or was it always your own brand?
The funny thing was, when I first started out doing Wulf and Batsy, my understanding was that's what you were supposed to do. You make your indie comic, you make a Xerox of it, you show it to all the different publishers at the convention, and you hope it's good enough that somebody will pick it up and put it out. And so the first time it came out was a company called Chanting Monks Press in 2004 to 2005. They put out the first story arc and then as a one-shot, and then they did some of the short stories in their anthology comic. And then they
do they own the rights to that, or
no,
different publishers?
No, it's all,
you can use all of it.
The rights have always stayed with me.
Okay.
Nobody else owns a piece of it except me. But Chanting Monks did a few things, and then they ended up kind of folding and not doing anything else. Then I met Josh Howard, who was already with Viper Press, and he twisted their arm and got them to put out a couple issues of Wulf and Batsy. And I did some other things at Viper too. But that didn't last very long. They got kind of clobbered by the 2008 financial crash. And so then I was on my own again. And then I thought, you know what? I'm only going to get this done if I do it myself. And plus, because of the issues that had come out through Viper, I was getting emails from readers saying, when's the next one? When's the next one? So I thought, I got to meet the reader demand. So that's when I decided to start self-publishing. And that's right around the time when the first print-on-demand type website started coming out, where you could order small numbers. So it wasn't a huge risk. And I tried doing single issues back then, But I found out that when I did trade paperbacks, it was a lot more economical because it cost less. Obviously, it cost more to print a trade paperback than a single issue, but you could put more pages in it and put a justifiably higher price tag on it, which meant there was more profit left over. So I'd print up a batch, sell those. There'd be a little bit of profit left over. I'd use that to fund the next printing. And before I knew it, the trade paperbacks were paying for themselves.
It's
And I
kind of
did
like
that from
Robert Crumb making his homemade comics and selling them out of the back of his truck, or it seems like
Yeah.
that sometimes, doesn't it? You're going from one project to the next, right? You're just hoping to get through that stretch of desert to get to the next desert to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But unlike Crumb, I had the luxury of a website.
Right. Yeah.
So I would sell them that way, and they were paying for themselves. And then it wasn't until 2021, after, I mean, gosh, how many years is that? 2008 to 2017. I'm terrible at math in my head, but 9 years, something like that. I was doing it by myself, and then Alterna came along in 2021. I took a little break in there because that's when our baby was born. But 2021, Alterna came along and was interested in picking it up. And so I went with them for 2 years, or was it almost 2001 to 2000? I'm sorry, what am I saying? 2021 to 2023 was my time at Alterna. Sorry. And then it just seemed like time to take it over myself again. So I had no fear about self-publishing because I'd done it before. It was just, can I do it in this new modern landscape where things have kind of changed, and it's now crowdfunding, which I wasn't experienced with on my own. And also people want these single issues as opposed to trade paperbacks. They want this, they want to see the ongoing series version continue. So is that going to be cost effective, and can I do that? So what I did next kind of planned, or what I was going to do next kind of depended on the success of this campaign. But it took off so well, and I met my goal so fast, I feel like confident to keep going with this, doing it this way.
I think there's a lot of love out there for your, Wulf and Batsy. I think that, when it was over there at Alterna or whatever brand you have it under now, people are going to follow you over there. They love the characters, the mysterious, it doesn't, it's a book, I would say, that doesn't take itself too seriously. Yeah. But it is not what you're expecting maybe when you pick it up.
Yeah. I get a lot of comments like that, people saying it caught them off guard for one reason or another. Because either they will say the sort of humorous, cartoony art style made me assume it was going to be a much lighter book, and then it went to these really dark, violent places, or dark psychological places. Or they'll say, because it's horror, I thought it would be much darker, and it was humorous and fun.
Right. I kind of have been thinking about this a lot lately, Bryan, that we as creators and writers, I think that's part of our job, to subvert expectations of the audience. It may be the page turner. Oh, I didn't see that coming. However, you can do that, to make it interesting.
I don't disagree, but I have to say, I don't really do that on purpose. I just draw the way I draw, and I have a weird imagination. Yeah. And I'm attracted to horror stories. That's the kind of ideas I get, is horror stories. But in the middle of working on those scary scenes or whatever, some goofy thing will pop in my head, and I'll be thinking, oh, it'd be funny if this happened in the middle of this traumatizing.
Or you have a bit of dialogue, which is a kind of a nice little line or something.
Yeah.
That pops in. Yeah.
And if it makes me laugh, I can't leave it out. I got to put
If you're like me, Bryan, you remember, like on Mission Impossible, they'd have the real tape, and he'd get the mission from that. It's always going on in your mind. If you're, and then, many years I was waiting for inspiration and to happen. Yeah. It never happens. Usually it's when you're doing something else and your mind's relaxed, and all of a sudden, bam. And you're like, oh, let me get that paper and pencil and write it down. It's not it seems like the harder you pursue it, the more elusive it is. But if you just kind of walk through the woods, it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah. That exact thing happened to me today. That happened to me today. I was in the car driving to pick up my daughter from school,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just bored on the road, and I just got an idea for a funny dialogue exchange in a story that I'm working on,
Mm-hmm.
and it just made me laugh while I was driving. I was like, oh, I've got to put that in the book. That's funny.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about it. It just popped in there, you know. But
Yeah.
that's kind of how. But when I think that's kind of that tells you when it's a good one, you know, is when it just kind of happens on its own.
If you were to condense all of Wolf and Batsy, your work thus far, into like say one book, how big would it be, or maybe a couple volumes?
Okay, that's a tough question because again, I'm terrible at math in my head.
Yeah.
But I did do the 4 trade paperbacks. The first one was 240 pages. The second one was,
Whoa!
I think the second one was 278 pages.
Wow.
The third and fourth one were both 250 pages because it was a total of 500-page story together. Those two,
Uh-huh.
volume 3 and 4. Those were the trade paperbacks before I
And
got picked up.
is there difference from like, I mean, there's difference in your characters from when you first conceptualized them and started printing them. You
Mhm.
kind of have kind of shifted and went in a new direction with the characters, right? So you'll see in some of those trade paperbacks the old stuff that's reprinted, right?
Oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're
Sort of
saying.
a difference of characters with the
Well, a little bit. One thing that happened when it got picked up by Alterna was um, the publisher wanted to start with that first trade paperback and reprint from the stories from the beginning,
okay.
which made me say that makes sense because that's
Yeah.
how I want to tell the story. But some of that 20-year-old artwork is kind of
Yeah.
embarrassing. There's a few
Yeah.
sore spots in there. If you don't
Yeah.
mind, I'd like to go in there and do a little revision, make it a revised edition, redo the lettering because the lettering
Uh-huh.
was sort of amateurish when I first did it. And so I did do some art touch-ups, plus the new covers. The covers were drawn in 2021. So the ongoing series, starting with issue 1 here,
Right.
this edition is a revised edition from the trade paperbacks, but
Yeah.
it's not crazy. It's not over the top revisions. It's just little things here and there.
But now the characters haven't, because you've had time to think about your property and
Yeah,
where your IP and where you want to take it.
okay, yeah.
But now the characters really haven't changed that much, you're saying, in the last 20 years?
That's not true.
Okay.
You see that change more in the trade paperbacks than in this ongoing series.
Okay. Yeah.
Because what happened was when Alterna wanted to reprint the trade paperbacks, we only got through the first volume,
Right. Yeah.
which ended up filling the first 6 issues of the ongoing series.
Which makes sense to me. You've already got it done. Now, yeah, you
Yeah,
had to do some touch up, but that's not like, Bryan, can you draw us an X amount page
right,
book? That's going to take longer. You
right.
know, so yeah,
But
you already got the material there. That's what I'm saying. I said that yesterday. I said, man, I wish I had the backlog that Bryan has, or like Renee has with Fiendish, because she's
yeah,
done so much world building. She's got reams of material of how she's thought this stuff out. It really takes some
yeah,
time and thought, doesn't it? Even with
she's
the
got
character.
she's she's got the same sickness I had.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where it's this obsession, you just can't not do it, you
Now,
know?
are those trade paperbacks and things like that? If people want to buy them, are they on your website, which we got
Um,
the link down there?
the trade, oh, okay, I should have sent you that link. The
Okay.
um, the trade paperbacks are on a website called Indie Planet. That was where
Oh, I know Indie Planet. I know Indie Planet. Yeah.
I did them through
Okay.
Indie Planet. So if you go on Google and put in Wulf and Batsy Indie Planet, it'll take you there, and you can order them there. That's the
Okay.
original self-published version.
Okay.
This ongoing series is, I guess you'd say, the revised version.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, but but yeah, the characters did evolve a lot over those 4 trade paperbacks because I sort of had two. I felt like they were on 2 different paths in terms of their destiny. Number one is figure out their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, because from the beginning their relationship is very vague. You don't know if they're friends or if they're attracted to each other or whatever. So
Right.
so that story evolves through the 4 trade paperbacks. Um, but the other path is like a path of redemption, where they start off very bad, and very very slowly over the course of the entire series. I would like to get them to straighten out and fly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
before they have to be destroyed.
Wow. There goes
But
the franchise, folks.
but I want to take forever to do that, so there'll be plenty of stories.
Okay.
Assuming I'm not destroyed first.
So are they, I know nothing about Wulf and Batsy, okay? My audience knows nothing about Wulf and
Okay.
Batsy. Your 30 second spiel, what is it?
Wulf and Batsy is the adventures of a ferocious werewolf and a cute female vampire wandering the earth, searching for a place to call home, but everywhere they go, they end up eating people and getting run out of town. It's not easy to be a monster.
So are they villains?
Hmm.
Are they heroes? See, that's kind of obscure,
The morality is
Yeah.
very fuzzy in this world.
Yeah,
it's a monster. It's a monster story told from the monster's point of view.
Okay. All right. Yeah. One of the most effective stories I saw was done by Bill Sienkiewicz, and that was when in his early days when he was doing the Neil Adams type,
Yeah.
style, and in his early days, and it was a Moon Knight story. It was in one of those early direct, like maybe 1983 direct Moon Knight reprints of his stuff that he had done, and it was the story was so powerful for me because it was like it told the story from the Hulk's point of view, and I think it ended with him meeting Moon Knight, and then the story started over and hit reset and told it from Moon Knight's point of view, and ended with him meeting the Hulk at the end, and then carrying the story on to its conclusion. I thought that was genius. I still think it's great, showing the same story of how this character arrived at that point and how that character arrived, telling the same story, but from two different points of view. Genius.
That is cool. Yeah. That's
it. To me, that's my favorite Moon Knight story, and it's one of my favorite Hulk stories too. Within the title of Moon Knight.
I mean,
it's just such a great idea.
Similar thing there. I mean, the morality kind of depends on whose point of view you're seeing it from.
Yeah. I mean, to some, Wulf and Batsy may be a hero. And that's what I'm playing with Devil Flyer. Is he a hero? I establish him kind of as a hero.
Yeah.
But in the next one, he's going to be portrayed as something different. So, I'm not really giving it away if he's a hero or a villain. I mean,
I'll tell you. Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was done. Go ahead.
Well, I was just you just made me think of something, which is one thing you could kind of compare it to a little bit, even though this is going to sound really going overboard probably, but it's kind of the same thing you see in the Martin Scorsese movies, his gangster movies.
Yeah.
Where he's not taking a moral position on what these people are doing. He's just showing it.
Right.
And when they're having a good time being mobsters, they're having a good time being mobsters, even if they're doing terrible things. And then when they fail and they're miserable and their lives are ruined.
And leave it up to the audience to sort of process all that. What did I just see?
Yeah, it's almost like a fly on the wall is just watching it objectively without taking any kind of moral position on it. Just showing you what happens. And I know that sounds like kind of, pretentious.
Well, I mean, there's different ways, there's different angles that those missiles can kind of come in from, right? You can, I mean, you can, and I don't know that, comics have always been kind of hobbled, right? Because you're on a monthly pace or a bi-monthly pace or a quarterly pace. And with self-publishing, you can take all the time you want, right? I remember certain projects from certain artists actually took years to come out. I don't advocate that, but
it's kind
like Charlie Chaplin, I adore Charlie Chaplin. He would take 2 years to make a movie.
Right.
And when it came out, it would be a hit. It would be the best he could give you, and he was kind of like Michael Bancroft, the Lucent, I'm going to do everything, the coloring, the inking, the every bit of it. And he would compose and sing and act and direct and the whole thing, and it was all Charlie Chaplin with a little bit of something else thrown in. But and he was doing silent movies when silent movies had already been out, out of vogue for 5 years or whatever, and they were a success.
Right. Well, I'll show you an example of what I'm what I'm talking about. Like this story, it was in Wolf and Batsy issue 3.
Right. Oh, that's the
And
ones I've got the ads in. Yeah.
in this, okay, yeah. Well, in this story, there were some undead corpses who had a problem, and Wolf and
Right.
Batsy came along and helped them. So in a way, in that story, they were heroes, right? But in
Yeah.
issue 8, they have found a home finally, but these troublesome humans invaded the place,
Right.
and now they have to deal with this threat to their new place where they live.
Yeah,
And some
I've
people,
heard you really
and
push
some
that they're really looking for a place to fit in.
Right. Well, in
Yeah.
this one, they did find a place to fit in, and these people
Uh-huh.
came in and threatened it. And so Wolf and Batsy are essentially the villains in this one because they're just cold-bloodedly getting rid of these people. And
Uh-huh.
I've had certain people have told me that they thought this issue was like the meanest Wolf and Batsy story of all time because they're the
Well,
most brutal.
and that was under the Alterna brand. I guess these other are under what is it called now?
It's called Bloody Weirdo Comics.
Yeah, bloody. Now that just harkens back to like the old weird 50s type stuff.
Yep,
Absolutely.
that was my
Pre-code. Yeah.
name.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that's probably the height of that and sort of like suspense uh sci-fi? Because there's sci-fi horror, there's different types of horror, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Would you say that was kind of the height with the EC stuff? There was horror comics before that.
Well, yeah, sure, but yeah, I love that. I love that style of horror. Where you're
Mm-hmm.
getting all the monsters
Yeah. Yeah.
and the murder and the good scary stuff and the haunted houses and everything like that.
Yeah.
But there's still a sense of humor to it. Like you said, it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah.
So it's still fun. It's not
Do
depressing.
you have any Dales or any Gold Keys or Charltons in your collection?
I don't think I have any Dales or Gold Keys or Charltons.
How dare you?
I don't have those. I have reprints of the Dr. Spectre stories. I have those.
Yeah.
I don't have the originals.
Yeah.
I have some Fiction House books, original
You're probably
comics.
better off with the reprints if they don't recolor them too garishly.
Yeah.
Sometimes the coloring on reprints, but some of those I go back to those 80s and 70s comics and I can hardly read them. It's so badly printed.
Yeah.
It really is. I was like, it's amazing that you paid that much for such crappy cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlton was the cheapest.
Yeah.
Their pages didn't even line up at the bottom. They were cut off. Right. It was the pinholes. Remember the pinholes that were in the bottom?
Oh, that's
the page?
Yeah.
And sometimes you get them and they'd stick.
Oh my gosh!
Pages together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you get the ink on your hands from them.
Newsprint comics even had that well into the early 80s. I remember those.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that smell.
Yeah.
There's just, it'll never be the same again, Brian, but there's no, I remember when I could go 6 miles an hour in my Model T. We can't be like that. We got to upgrade to a Volvo or something, move with the times. Well, Brian, it's been a joy. I don't have to end it, but I don't want to be, you probably want a bathroom break at this time. But thanks for coming on, and I hope I didn't ruin any future prospects of having you on. I'm surprised you didn't ask about my shower. Most people see that and go, "Is that a shower in your library?"
I did.
It is indeed a shower. It's a time travel shower. Yeah. But
so as long as you hold your comic up like this, you can read. You can take a shower in your reading room, right?
Exactly. Rub-a-dub-dub, rubber ducky, you're the one. I grew up with Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers. That's probably why I'm psychedelically just kind of warped. I don't know.
And Spider-Man on the Electric Company.
Yeah. Oh man, some of my there are some Spider-Man fans and there are some Spider-Man fans. I'm one of those that is like, I have some good memories of like the Jekyll and Hammerhead and, the Ross Andrew years, the spider buggy.
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
Bronze Age, a little bit,
The
prior
Mego
to
toy. I had
the.
the.
I never had the Magos that I do have were Planet of the Apes, which I
Yeah.
still have, as a matter of fact.
Yep.
I suffered a fire and my whole collection burned up in '97.
Oh,
But
dude.
but you know what? All that's replaceable. It
Yeah.
was the original artwork by John Byrne and Dan Day and Jim Starlin that can't be
Oh
one
boy.
kind of items that can't be replaced because there was a one of a kind.
Wow.
That's what really hurt.
That hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, that hurts if you've ever. But I bought out a comic shop and got right back up on that horse. There's only
Wow.
been a couple years when I was doing missionary work and prison stuff that I didn't collect comics, but
Mm-hmm.
kind of focused on other things. And there was a lot in comics that were just kind of
Yeah.
kind of put me off,
Sure.
and this stringing things along, you got to get 12 titles to get the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably killed a lot of collectors, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like that you're sticking with one IP and you're capitalizing and growing that. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, they dip their toe in here. Okay, that didn't quite work. Let's go over here and do this,
Right.
something totally different. Why don't you try and make that a success?
Yeah.
Um, one of the big failures, I think, from DC was canceling Adventure Comics that had been around since the late 30s,
Mm-hmm.
in 1983. The last 2 years were in little digest form, but it was an anthology. It could have been anything. It could have been
Mm-hmm.
Superman, Wulf and Batsy, Devil
Mm-hmm.
Fire. It didn't matter. Do like they did with the Avengers. Put Wolverine, put Spider-Woman, the characters that everybody liked to see in the book and make it a seller, a success. Instead, they
Yep.
canceled it.
Yeah.
They later brought it back, but they've already
Mm-hmm.
interrupted it at that. That's one thing I hate to see. I'll give you, here's your 12th edition of Wolf and Batsy #1.
Right.
Why? I don't mind the limited series, especially in the 80s, like the Mike Zeck Punisher and,
Mm-hmm.
the Longbow Hunter, and some of those things like that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
mind that, or do it as a separate book, but I like that continual. I got to give it to Spawn and Todd McFarlane for keeping that numbering and achieving that,
Mm-hmm.
and Savage Dragon of keeping that continual numbering going. That's what
Yeah.
I like. I think that's
Well,
what fans like.
yeah. Well, I mean, I've done some new stories in recent years, but they are stories that take place in the timeline.
Yeah.
So when I plug them in there, they're placed with care, so they make sense as the story goes along.
Yeah. Now, is your universe going to expand? Is the Wolf? I mean, are there going to be something introduced that might be a success that spins off into its own title, like
Um,
Frankenstein's son or something?
I don't really have plans for that so much, but I do have some ideas for some other titles that I would like to do. Problem is, I'm only one person.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But and right now this is the thing that's selling, So
Uh huh.
so I'm sticking with it.
It's gorgeous. Now, do you do your own coloring?
I
What
do everything. Yeah,
you
it's
do
100%.
everything?
It's
Okay.
100% me. Logos, lettering,
Yeah.
everything.
Now, when it comes to coloring, what kind of sensibility are you reaching for? Sort of a poppy 80s, 70s, sort of Bronze Age, Copper Age type pop, uh,
Um,
or more animated quality?
well, I'm using flat colors like the old comics that I love.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
As
some of the new comics are too muddy. They're too dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just kind of going with it's. I don't. It's more intuitive. I don't really
Okay.
analyze it. I mean, this one was a very conscious effort.
The genius of Brian Baugh. I didn't really think about it at the time. I just did it.
This,
I just crap out genius. It just happened.
all right.
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say
Okay.
this one. I was thinking very much about the color because I wanted this one to be an homage to the old classic Halloween record, the chilling, thrilling sounds of the haunted house, the old Disney record from that I had as a kid that I loved, with the spooky house on the hill and the orange and then the blue grass.
Yeah.
I was thinking very much of that cover painting on that old record when I did this one.
And
But
just
most
the
of the time,
contrast of like the principal characters are in black and white or some kind of tonal, and then color all around them. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why it's your campaigns. Well, who knows how high it can go? You know, I know it's kind of trickle in after the initial launch, but yeah, I mean, you know, that was kind of the all. You know, there's some crowdfunders out there, but when it came to the Alterna or people like yourself that came out of Alterna, there you got your, you know, fans out there that are really, you know, liking the different properties, you know.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. The Alterna crowd really did take to Wulf and Batsy.
Now Shadowhawk probably had to go to bed, but he would probably ask you one question, so I got to ask one question on his behalf. What do you think about Bernie Wrightson?
I actually had the pleasure of getting to know Bernie a little bit. Yeah, okay. Well, from the beginning. I mean, like I said, I got the Creep Show comic book in '82 when I was like 9, 10 years old. I'd already had some Swamp Thing and some House of Secrets, but I didn't make the connection it was the same guy. Creep Show was the first book where I was like, I looked at the front and I want to know who the name of the guy who drew this, and I memorized his name, and then I started figuring out he was the guy that did all these other things. And then when I was in 7th grade, that's when Cycle of the Werewolf came out. That was his next big collaboration with Stephen King. The illustrations on that are masterful. I love that. So I ended up becoming a Bernie Wrightson fan and following him my whole life. When I was in art school in my early 20s, I got to meet him for the first time at a comic book convention. He was super nice to me. That was the year his trading cards set came out, probably 92, 93, somewhere in there. And first time I ever met him. And I showed him I brought him my portfolio, and I was like, can I just show you, just because you're my biggest favorite artist, I'm your biggest fan. And he was really super nice, looked at it all, and he's like, and then his little booth babe that was next to him goes, you want to buy the trading card set? Which at that time he was selling the uncut posters. So it was just all the trading cards on one sheet. They were selling them as posters. And she's like, you want to buy the poster of the new trading cards? And I said, well, I'm just a college student. I can't afford to spend any money right now. And Bernie turned around, he goes, well, I made them. I can decide. Here, I'll give you one. And he gave me one for free.
Wow.
And it couldn't have been nicer. So years later, in my 30s, I'm living in California, and I'm doing. I get a job doing a book on how to draw instructional books, but it was all focused on how to draw monsters, and the publisher wanted to have some established horror artists work in there. Who do you know? Who's someone to get? And of course, Bernie Wrightson's name came up. So the publisher, who had connections, looks him up, and they find out he's got a studio apart. He was renting an apartment that he was using as an art studio, which was 20 minutes from my house.
Wow.
So he gave them permission to pass on his phone number. They gave me his phone number. I called Bernie. I kind of said who I was. He's like, oh yeah, I talked to your publisher. He's like, you can come over anytime. And he invited me over to his studio. Of course, he didn't remember me from the first time I met him at that convention so long ago.
Yeah.
But he invited me to come over to his studio, and I was like, and he's like, let's go over some of the artwork that I own the rights to that I can give you permission to use in your book. So I said, okay, This is crazy. So I go over there like this fanboy, and I'm determined to not be a fanboy. I'm like, I'm just going to get in there, do whatever I got to do to get him to sign whatever paper and give me permission to do whatever artwork I can use in this book. And then I'm going to get out. I don't want to bother him. And I went over there, and we started talking about horror movies. And I ended up being there for like 2 hours. And it was the greatest thing. Like he showed me his original Captain Stern pages. He pulled them out of a box. I'm holding them, the original pages, like this close to my face, looking at the paintbrush marks and how he did it. I saw stacks of paintings and drawings laying around this place that I've still never seen in any of his books. He had his monster toys just lining the shelves. cat skeletons, gorilla skulls, you name it, all over the whole place. It was amazing. And there was one more time. There was a point, like about a half 6 months later, roughly, where the publisher gets back to me and they're like, we need this other piece of paper signed by him, blah blah blah. You're not getting your paycheck till you get this piece of paper signed to get permission to do it, blah blah blah. And I was like, oh my gosh. And they're like, it was Friday. They're like, you got till Monday to get this signed, or the book's not coming out. This publisher was a little bit bullyish in their behavior. And at this point, I was working in animation. I didn't need the money. So I was like, I was not going to be bullied. But at the same time, I wanted the book to come out. So I called Bernie's phone number late on a Friday. And I was like, I hate to do this, but this publisher's put me through the ringer on this. They want this by Monday. Is there any way we can get this taken care of? And I could not believe it. Bernie called, my wife and I went out to dinner or something. He calls back and there's an answering machine message from Bernie saying, I totally understand that. I've been through that with publishers before. You can come over Sunday morning and we'll get this taken care of. It'll be fine. Wow. I could not believe how nice he was. So I go over there Sunday morning. I'm like, I'm not going to take up his time. I'm going to get this stupid signature on this piece of paper. I'm going to get out. And I swear it happened again. First thing that happens, I walk in his place on a Sunday morning. He goes, you want a cup of coffee? I was like, are you kidding me? Sure. And Bernie writes and goes to his freaking coffee maker and makes me a cup of coffee. I could not believe it. I'm sitting there thinking, my favorite artist since I was in 4th grade made me a cup of coffee. What a nice guy. Can you believe that? Signs the piece of paper. We get talking about horror movies again. And I ended up there for another 2 hours again. And I'm still like trying not to like take up his time looking. Right. And he just keeps bringing stuff up. He's like, did you see the new George Romero movie, Land of the Dead? What'd you think? He was like that. And you and I have been talking, where it's like you got stuff in common, you can just go on forever. And and that's the kind of guy he was. And that's the last time I may have seen him at a convention one time after that, and he remembered me, and we had a nice conversation. But I didn't see him much after that. And so I had that little window of time where we almost were like friends.
Well, there you go.
But it was a dream come true.
Where I first kind of got a hold of him because they would put the creator's name on there. That was different. Pacific Comics. Yeah. With Bernie Wrightson's Macabre, whatever it was, and just wonderful stuff. I love Pacific Comics. I wish it hadn't went out. They had a pretty good line there, Didn't last very long. And then you had Eclipse and First and bunch that come out during the 80s. It really was a boom in the 80s. Amazing. But now, did you like, one last question, did you like Alan Moore, his run on Swamp Thing?
I did like it because he's a good writer.
Yeah.
But to me, Swamp Thing is those first 10 issues, the Len Wein, Bernie Wrightson.
Why didn't he do more? Why didn't he do more than 10 issues? And then the One House of Mystery.
I don't know. And then the saga, the Swamp Thing, which followed, I love that too, because I was a kid and it was a great monster comic, and it was just monsters fighting monsters, and that's all I needed as a little boy, So when Alan Moore did his thing, it's like, it's good because he's a good writer, but getting overly intellectual with it at times, and the whole environmentalist angle, it's like, I don't need that. And when he kind of did the story, didn't he do a story where he kind of said that Swamp Thing actually wasn't Alec Holland?
Yes.
He was some sort of spirit of the. Then I was like, that's not my Swamp Thing anymore. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, he changed the mythos of it. Yeah.
I mean, I love Watchmen. I'm an Alan Moore fan. Sure, I love League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and all that, but that's not my Swamp Thing.
Yeah. Now, how are you on Man Thing?
Oh, he's great too. I love him.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think my heart is with Swamp Thing though, because that's the one I really read.
Mine is too, but now I've met some Man Thing. I've got a friend, artist that works with me, Dr. Laylock, and he likes Man Thing. He likes that he's more of a force of nature, and that he doesn't really talk and whatnot. Yeah. And Marvel did a series just a few years back with the Goosebumps writer. His writing on that was abysmal, but the artwork was wonderful. Yeah. But he actually made Man Thing in the first issue a Hollywood star.
Oh boy.
And where he could speak for the very first time. And I thought, man, that is so far off character. This is so whack. And when I read it, it was like this. I'd never read any of his Goosebumps stuff, but I knew he was widely successful with that. The only reason I bought that was the artwork. Jason Bascom coming in here at the end saying Swamp Thing is better. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, those first 10 issues with Wayne and Wrightson are just, that's classic comics. I mean,
yeah, but I'm always scratching my head. Why didn't he do more than 10? Really?
I know that Wrightson talks about that in his book, A Look Back. There's some interviews where he goes through all the issues and he kind of talks about each one. And he does say that by the time he was getting to issue 10, he was kind of feeling burned out and he's not proud of his work in issue 10, which is that one with all the Unmen and Arcane comes back, which is a great issue. But
I wish he had established some good villains besides Arcane and the Unmen, you know?
Yeah.
There just wasn't. It was kind of like everyone was kind of one and done, and they had one issue where he met Batman.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and then of course, but I mean, you can see what they're doing there. They're like, let's have fun with all the monsters. So they had the Patchwork Man, who was kind of a Frankenstein. They had that great werewolf issue, which is one of my favorite covers with the werewolf and Swamp Thing's hiding under the leaves.
Or the Cthulhu, like go into the cavern where they trick him, and they've got you know. I've actually got some Brazilian production artwork from Swamp Thing.
Wasn't that called The Lurker in Tunnel 13 or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they were trying to have Swamp Thing be a human plant sacrifice for the thing. It was kind of like cultish, right?
Yeah.
Leading
that
to
was
his
phenomenal stuff.
Yeah. I forget the reasoning. Maybe they had to make a sacrifice or the whole village would be wiped out by the creature. I can't remember, but I remember the snow scenes.
Yeah.
You know, showing the footprints through the snow leading to the cave and everything.
There was the issue with the witch.
Yeah.
Where they tied her to the tree.
Yeah. He did a lot in 10 issues, but it's just, I wish there was more.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And it's amazing that both Man Thing and Swamp Thing came out within a month of each other, you know.
Yeah, that definitely feels like a Marvel versus DC copyright battle.
All right, this is absolutely my last. But why is Marvel and DC so incestuous? Why do they cheat and copy each other all the time?
You're asking the wrong guy. I don't know.
Right.
I honestly don't know.
Okay. I think one sees they're successful with Marvel Zombies. We'll do Darkest Night, and you know they're just it's kind of frustrating actually that they did, you know, because I mean they could go back and do nostalgia, you know, touch into the nostalgia stuff if you know if nothing else, you know. Right. They have such a rich history and yet they just don't use it.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm kind of glad that you're into all these old things, you know. It's like some movies, what's that? You know, pre-code horror, what's that? You know something about it.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
I love that stuff.
You know some of the history of comics. Yeah,
I'd rather get my inspiration from that stuff.
You're going to go far, and I'll tell you why. Because just like John Byrne, I always like to use him as an example. His first Fantastic Four comic, his first comic was Fantastic Four #5, a good one, because it probably had one of the best early, if not the best, Joe Sennett, who wouldn't ink Jack Kirby for a decade later or whatever. I mean, that was the one issue he did early on, and it was the first appearance of Dr. Doom, and that's when they go back in time, and the thing becomes Blackbeard and everything. It's just a time travel story and everything. It's lovely. And but I said all that to say this: it made John Byrne a fan, and I think the greatest artists, writers, whatever, that are in comics and the ones that are really going to do something and pass on the legacy is like yourself. You're a fan first, from a kid, from an early age, and you love the material, and you're like, ooh, you know, you can just see John Byrne. When he got on Fantastic Four, he's like, yeah, that's the top. Yeah, I've done Avengers, I've done X-Men, but now we're really going to do it, you know, because he's that little kid going, if I did Fantastic Four, I would do this and I would tell this story.
Right.
And that's what he did.
Yep.
And it holds up. It's good material.
Yeah,
I
and
think
those
the
companies have
greatest.
changed so much. I don't know if I'm jealous that I can't work for them anymore. And
Well,
I mean, it's like it's who you know. That's how people get hired. And
yeah.
I don't know anybody in Marvel and
Well,
DC.
I think that's what I get from Wolf and Batsy. When I pick up Wolf and Batsy and I read it, I go, he's a fan of this material.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
And it doesn't take, the little Kong, which I love Kong. So that was great. But, putting it in there. And then, they always said that during the 50s, 60s, whatever, gorillas on covers sell. That was one of Infantino said one thing that
Yes.
always sells a comic. And that's why you see so many gorillas, space gorillas and killer gorillas and whatever, bomber gorillas on
I sure
covers.
bought them, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was a sucker for a gorilla or a monkey. Yeah.
How about a gorilla with an axe?
There you go. I mean, you don't shy away from decapitation and sort of the old EC horror. I mean, his eyeball and his eye stalk and everything in the blood. But it's all
Yeah.
done in like a cartoony, friendly form, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fun to
Yeah.
get crazy with this stuff. Here, I have a panel here. I'll show you. It's probably
Okay.
one of my gory panels. This guy
A
gets
gory fan. Yeah.
the gorilla suit maniac with his axe chops this guy's face off.
Oh God. Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but it worked. Somehow he made it happen.
Now, yeah, some of this, like this, that is just like Basil Wolvington, off the, chain there.
Yeah.
That's almost like underground comics,
Yeah.
in a
kind
lot
of is.
of
I mean,
execution. I
yeah,
think
some
when you
people have
look
asked
at
me,
it,
like,
you go, that's fun because I've never seen it before.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it gives you that evil little laugh inside, that's
Yeah. Well, Bryan,
but
give your wife, your significant other, whatever, your daughter a kiss for us. Thank them for your time. I'm cognizant of your time and those that your other family members, and we are praying for your family member that's been in poor health too.
oh, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate that. We're
Yeah.
praying for him too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope that resolves itself in a good way for you.
Yeah.
Thanks again for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I hope you'll come back sometimes and you'll see that I drop you links randomly. If you can come on, come on. If you don't worry about it. I just like people to drop in and say hi and give us updates.
Yeah. Cool,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds great. Thanks.
I wish
Thanks
you
for having me
all
on.
success over there on Fund My Comic.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Let's
Yeah.
hope. Thanks a lot.
And let's get him that 100th backer. I mean, I'm going to update this just to make sure that it's still at 99 backers. You're killing it, man. 100th backer, 147% there, and 41 days to go. Did you put it up for 60?
Yeah.
Originally? Okay.
Yeah.
And you just did it. Yeah. I'm kind of doing the 30 days and then another 30 and kind of
Right.
and then it'll go in demand after that. Is it going to be going in demand or can you tell us yet?
I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
Because now over there on Fund My Comic, they have a storefront option where you can just kind of have passive income.
Yeah, I'll probably do that. I mean, this was so just like, let's just see what happens. Throw it out there. I worked on it for a long time, but my mentality was, let's just see what happens, because I didn't know what to expect. So, if that works, that's what it will do.
Well, somehow I think we're going to be in good hands, and that we're going to have a lot of Wulf and Batsy coming down the pike, or something out of you. You're a creative individual, and I appreciate the time you've given us, and all. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks. Yeah. Same here. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, that's it, folks. The great Bryan Baugh. It just kind of happens. He's a, he's a genius at work. So, he just. I'm glad we got similar interests. That you're so learned in this stuff because you're you're younger than me, and I'm still learning. That's a great thing about comics. You can study for a lifetime, can't you?
Yeah.
And I
There's
guess
so
you
much
could say
out
that
there.
about film or coin collecting or card collecting or sports. I mean, it's an endless field, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, you're one of the good guys in comics nowadays, and I really appreciate it.
I'm trying to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, go out and buy his book. I mean, his 3 books. That's what you got up there, right?
Yeah.
You got stretch goals. You said you met your, kind of your
We've already
goals so
unlocked them
quick.
all.
Yeah. You gonna be adding anything more?
No,
No, that's it.
no, I assumed it would take a lot longer to meet our goal than
Yeah.
this.
Those are
So,
killer, man. And
so
again, I think the colors pop. Can we see the backs? Have you got like stats or what's the backs like? Okay, so you get a rundown of each character.
yep, kept it very
Yeah,
simple, but
yeah,
yeah. But the funny thing is, I put these on the thing, and they were like 4 separate stretch goals, uh, and they
yeah.
were all spread out. Like every fourth of the goal amount, one would be locked, one would be
Right,
unlocked.
right.
But it got funded so fast. The first 3 were unlocked in the first 24 hours, and
Now,
then the last.
if you had to say, a hero's only as great as the rogues gallery. I love this guy. Now,
Yeah.
Gorilla Suit Man, Maniac. Is he your main villain or just one out of many? Because there's Baron von.
No, the main villain is Professor von Zagzog.
Okay, so that's him. Okay, so that's their
Yes.
main yeah,
Sorry, I'm getting a bad angle on that guy,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he does appear in the 2 of the new issues that are on the crowdfunding campaign.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So you're steadily doing a rogues gallery, right? Coming up with
Yeah.
different villains and different. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I look forward to having you back on, Bryan,
Cool. Yeah, I look forward to it.
sometime soon. Just keep
Sure.
us updated.
Will
And
do, man.
I'm sorry you really didn't get to meet. He bounced while I was playing, my co-host, but he's a big
Okay.
supporter. He's bought your stuff too, and
Oh,
I
wow.
have too. And it's he's like over 400 campaigns now that he's back. So big
Wow.
supporter. He's leaving me in the dust. Uh,
Wow.
but yeah, we loved all that stuff that came out of Alterna, and then we're glad that and it's a friend of yours actually doing some lettering for me, Cleek Gleason,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
with Mighty Mascots. Yeah.
Yes.
So we love the Alterna crowd over here, or creators that have been formerly with Alterna,
Mm-hmm.
and we love what you guys are doing, man. It's great.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I appreciate that. And tell your friend thanks for me as well.
Right, I will. He'll be sorry that he kind of had to sleep, miss it. He might have. He operates on his phone, so it's amazing that he's been with me over 2 years as my co-host. But try and catch us sometime on replay, Bryan, and
Okay.
we have a lot of fun. I think yesterday we had Mike Barron on.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Jason Bascom. We've had Matt on, who's been in the chat. Different various people at various times. You never know what's going to happen. Around here, we just like to have fun and make it fun. You remember fun, folks?
I'm all for that.
And with that word, we got to go. The way we go out is we say keep collecting. Can you say keep collecting?
Keep collecting.